All right, here we go. Let me make sure everything's fine on my end. Perfect. Perfect. All right, chat. Phew. Okay. So we're going to be doing, just to double check here. Gotcha. Right. Okay. Perfect. Cool. All right. Oh, there's Raya. We'll get some shots here. Yeah. Okay. So today is the Raya shot day. We're gonna try to get as many shots of Raya, and I guess all the recusants we're invading too, so we don't have to go through this song and dance again in the future in case I ever have to cover my ass. But yeah. Cool. All right. All right, cool. Yeah, howdy, Xavier. Good to see you in chat. I've done quite a few tweaks to the analysis here, and I've already thought of maybe doing another one after giving it more thought. So we'll see about that, but like, yeah, we're going to be reviewing this 30-page again. Again, I'm not too surprised after doing all the tweaks and edits and having deleted a paragraph because, again, thanks to Fran, I was able to confirm. I was like, oh, this isn't actually Rykard connected. Okay, that makes these easier. Paragraph just gone. And now it's still 30 pages, which again is still ridiculous. It's another 30-pager here. Like, holy hell. Like, you in mind, Jeff, for like Dark Souls 3, I think Londor is the only one that got this long. This is there's just a lot going on with Rykard and his family, I guess. But anyway, after doing these edits and stuff, I'm feeling a lot more happy with like just the factual stuff, and there were a few more typos and things we didn't catch in the previous review. So hopefully this will be the last time we need to do any major edits and changes beyond, like I said, there's maybe one more thing I want to do, but we'll see. That's what this is all for. So yeah, let's get right to that. Okay.
For lies and justice. Before he became Lord of Volcano Manor, Rykard was born a Carian prince and received the appropriate sorcery education. This sorcerer also wields a great sword, so likely studied swordplay growing up similar to his aunt. The prince may well have been prepared to follow in Rellana's footsteps and join the Enchanted Knights. But if so, his life took a different turn when Radagon suddenly left the royal family to become Marika's consort. After becoming the Eternal Queen's child by marriage, the new demigod ended up with the title of Praetor, essentially the judicial officer of the Erdtree Kingdom. Gideon clarifies that this is the occupation of a judge, with leadership over the country's inquisitors. And with this, he was assigned a lordship over Mt. Gelmir and became the proprietor of its castle manor. That insinuates that Rykard's new duties were what brought him to that territory looming ominously above Korea Manor. Although the kanji for an inquisitor is a questioning duties official, Japan used the act of sekemen, ultimately as a colloquial term for torture in the Edo period. These Erdtree officials were tasked with compelling confessions from suspects by whatever means, far beyond mere interrogation. Such would be appropriate for the officials in grubby blue robes the Erdtree Kingdom employed, whose darker duties included surveillance. And as we see, the Inquisition is comprised of those individuals, such as Giza. Besides him, there is also Rykard. Alongside the demigod's many portraits in Volcano Manor hangs the painting of a man in blue official's robe, the unique design on the chest suggestive of a higher status. Combined with the bearded mask matching his other portraits, there is no doubt that this figure, too, is the Praetor. Perhaps the masks he and his consort wear are part of some policy, but the demigod joined a division of Marika's covert enforcers, and their work in Gelmir is obvious.
Well, 1 second. There we go. More snake therapy. The snake is getting more care. Listen, now it's for the mommy issues. We're treating all sides. You know, they can't say we're sexist here. We treat every kind of issue in this in this therapy hellhole. They put Red 40 in the bloody fireplace. Yeah, it's funny. What was it? Was it Xavier who said the other day that like it's funny how like they're burning like these volcanic stones and crap, and yet like in the town it's like arbitrarily yellow for the most part, and then in here it's like blood red. It's like, okay.
Eradication of paganism. Recall that the volcanic land rebelled against the Erdtree at the direction of its pagan god. Even with the Great Serpent defeated, there was still that population of followers to consider. It was one thing to execute or enslave the combatants and demand submission from the rest, but one can hardly expect a genuine conversion from the vanquished. Snake worship was part of their culture for so long, it would take time for hearts to wholly embrace the Erdtree. In the meantime, the bitterness of defeat was sure to make many privately intransigent about their ancestral beliefs, particularly in the castle town at the religion center. Those people may go through the motions, but there was no way of knowing what they were plotting behind closed doors. One cookbook posits a missionary presence, but the faith had to be cognizant of the pagans consolidating their position on the mountain. And yet, Rykard's revival of Gelmir hexes entails that such pagan arts and practices were lost over time, not built upon. Why is this unless there was some countervailing force diminishing the pagans' knowledge and numbers? Enter the Inquisition. Marika was assuredly aware of this lingering pagan threat and didn't want another rebellion after how disastrous the first was for her family. At the same time, she didn't want to simply wipe out the population, if only because of personal ties to the culture. The issue was therefore before subtracting from it fealty to the snake while preserving the province. The only solution was to send in her own people to surgically excise the cancer in the culture, and they weren't alone. In cut descriptions, Gelmir knight armor would belong to the royal army, implying that the troops were deployed from Leyndal. We do see when raising his banner during the shattering, Rykard's army used the same flagpole as the capital's forces, the Erdtree crowning the top. A corpse inside the manor likewise holds the ash of war for royal knight's resolve. It is likely then that a detachment was left to occupy the castle town after the snake god was slain, where Marika's officials in blue then took charge. And together, they brought everyone within the castle walls into line through force and intimidation. Contrast to the manor and churches, the castle town has barred windows on every home and related building, some additionally boarded up. Streets themselves are gated, with gates and chains blocking more than a few front doors. Some parts of town even retain proper cells and hanging cages. Overall, the place is properly regarded as a prison town, where natives had lived on the strict schedule of their Erdtree taskmasters. The way commoners in town loiter around, their wardens wouldn't even permit them the decency to cover themselves for probable fear they would smuggle blasphemy beneath them. Anyone who deviated from the program was jailed and soon to be brought to the
I've thought about this, and I'm wondering, I think I should remove this, because as much as I like this idea, and I really do like this idea, that the pagans were so abused that they weren't even allowed the privacy of proper clothing to cover themselves. I don't think this is the case. I think the reason why we only find these naked guys here in the prison town is because it's hot. I think it's just because of the lava. Like, I was looking at that and I'm like, really? That place is just hot. Like, the snake men, for the most part, aren't really wearing any clothes, right? You see, like, on their models, they're kind of scorched and stuff, right? Where you're like, well, maybe you want clothes for protection, but maybe the idea is like that's preferable to just like sweltering, because it's just how hot it is inside the volcano. And obviously we're a player and stuff, there's no heat mechanic in this game or anything, so it's not like there's anything too crazy or whatever, but it's just something that I've thought about. I'm like, you know what, I think I'm putting too much stock in the nudity. I think the simple answer is just like, guys, it's, yeah, like, sure, the soldiers and stuff, obviously they have uniforms that's for protection and stuff. Obviously most of them are dead and everything like that, so it doesn't really matter anymore. The heat's not going to bother them one way or the other. But I think that's something I'm just not considering, is the fact that now we have the lava that's returned, and now everyone is stripping down bare in order to deal with the sweltering heat. And I think that's probably it. Tanth bought a bunch of LED lights for the manor off Amazon to set the mood. The LED, yeah, that's funny. All right, but yeah, let's get back to it.
Castle, which maintains a number of torture devices along the path to the owner's audience chamber. From Judas.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna probably be the next big edit I do, which is gonna be anything involving the nudity. So let's just have this marked just so I don't forget. But yeah, I also mentioned the missionary thing earlier because I thought it was important to establish, is like, hey, there is a missionary here, so there is someone here to convert. I might actually bring up the church too, the church in town. I have to think about that one. But yeah, we might do some changes here and replace this with like a small reference to the church, and maybe the fact that the church is directly connected to the manor for the Inquisition and stuff like that. Okay, now moving to it.
The way commoners in town loiter around, their wardens wouldn't even permit them the decency to cover themselves for probable fear they would smuggle blasphemy beneath them. Anyone who deviated from the program was jailed and soon to be brought to the castle, which maintains a number of torture devices along the path to the owner's audience chamber. From Judas chairs to crosses to guillotines, the Inquisitors had plenty of ways to pressure sinners to confess. And so, the Inquisition spent its days surveilling the population for signs of deceit, confirming their disloyalty, and then sentencing them to execution, sinners donning the hood the local nomadic merchant sells. This grim task to ferret out pagans and make an example of them should date back to the immediate aftermath of the God Hunts. Naturally, that means someone else leading the Inquisition before Rykard, and we in all likelihood know who. Fort Lyad is currently under assault, the garrison inside massacred. The one survivor is a noble sorcerer whose spirit hides on an obscure platform behind the defenses. Apparently, the resident lord of the fort took his fire scorpion charm from the nearby empty chest before leaving his defending troops to perish to the attackers. Though he obviously didn't escape death himself, the cowardly aristocrat nonetheless sneers at anyone finding a spot, insisting on surviving so that he may return to Volcano Manor. If he originates from the manor, then the assassin's talisman empowering fire attacks conveys his intentions. The man most likely wished to assassinate Rykard, using the flames of Gelmir against him. And if so, then he almost certainly is the praetor's predecessor, a noble with a grudge for the prince getting him demoted to a minor lord in the province. Put simply, Rykard was only continuing work which had already long been underway before he was even born. If anything, his appointment to the praetorship was proof of his new stepmother's concern that rooting out the old blasphemy was taking too long for her liking. In this new age of fundamentalism, surely there were more efficient means of identifying the villains and bringing them to Erdtree justice? Rykard stepped up to the challenge. His weapon is a golden holy sword demanding faith of its wielder, showing how the sorcerer affirmed the core tenets of fundamentalism in his capacity as chief inquisitor. Rykard seems to have even seen this as an opportunity to measure up against his father, Gelmir's knights under the demigod donned red plumes representative of his relation to the hero king. This desire to hearken to his lineage is especially notable since he didn't actually bear any of it himself. Knights to other shard bearers often decorate their helmets with hair matching the color of their respective demigods' locks. The only other knights to use plumage are the cuckoos, due to their specific avian connection. To see the same from Rykard's army suggests that the prince was peacocking as son of the hero when he didn't actually have the hair to display. The introductory cutscene cements that impression, depicting Rykard with light strands as he is being devoured by the Great Serpent. While heavily stylized, none of his portraits feature particularly dark hair either, and his one non-stylized Inquisitor portrait hides it under a mask and red head wrap. The man wasn't born with fiery hair like we see with his brother and sister, but golden hair like Marika. Ignoring the obvious fact that Rykard inherited the god's blood through her other half, this would be justifiable to most as a product of Radagon's nebulous relation to her side of the royalty. Even so, the Carian prince evidently wished to flaunt that paternal side, regardless of the embarrassing truth that he had none of the hero's blood to show for it specifically. Indeed, Rykard was no stranger to ostentation. As Gelmir's ruling governor, the man lived like a king, with a crown, throne, and plethora of bejeweled gold rings on each finger. That he hangs so many portraits of himself, especially in his throne room, speaks to the conceit of the demigod calling the mount home. With so much luxury present in just the guest hall, indulgent is the least of his vices. At one point, From Software even considered him calling his gemmed holy sword Evelyn like the weapon beloved by similarly ostentatious and disreputable nobles in Bloodborne. No demigod displays the same level of opulence. Rykard leaves visitors every reminder that he is the son of the Elden Lord, measuring up his kingliness to the hero who became consort to two regal lines. Even accepting the praetor's duty reflects a determination to prove his bona fides to Golden Order fundamentalism when compared to the sex inventor. What better demonstration of his faith than to be the one to identify when a person falls outside the regulation? If the law is golden, he is its magnificent judge. One cannot undersell the hypocrisy. Gideon describes the praetor as snake-like in his place at Gelmir, and certainly, his greed was comparable to the reptile that swallows its prey whole with his wasteful spending. Moreover, snakes are known for being two-faced and silver-tongued, and Rykard was no less cunning and duplicitous. The tortures became worse. Cut content reveals that Datakar was originally imagined as a long-standing nobleman who skinned his own face as Rykard's assistant, testing all methods of torture on himself so that the knowledge may be dedicated to the Inquisitor. Such insanity posits the new lengths Rykard would go for his justice, and we can still see that same creativity in the final game. Giza prefers to wield a saw blade device of presumably his own invention. Befitting his name, reference.
I just want to point out that most of this stuff regarding Datakar has pretty much been picked up by Giza, right? With the whole, doing damage to your face, obviously creating new tools and stuff for the Inquisition or whatever, essentially for Rykard. So I do wonder if the Paramore thing is still true. They just basically cut Datakar and just transferred all that lore to Giza. Just kind of curious, I don't really harp on the whole Paramore thing from the cut dial, the cut item description and stuff like that in this, but it is something that kind of gets me curious. It's always interesting to think about how much of this is stuff that's still in the game but just left unsaid or just considered not important enough to detail, right? Always curious. It's kind of like the thing with Radahn and being the Giant Slayer stuff. Is did the Redmanes actually kill giants and stuff in Caelid, or is that kind of just an idea? It was a possibility. There's a feasible route for it, but they also decide, nah, we're not going to actually have that happen. Just one of those things to think about,
In Giza for a serrated edge, the jagged spin ravages skin, maximizing pain with the hemorrhaging. The Inquisition also invented a candlestick spear to pierce victims' flesh while searing their blood. All of it promoted the cruelty of the worst criminals. But, of course, the oh-so-holy magistrate acted with impunity when his Inquisition inflicted this torment on alleged sinners. All of it was designed to make victims lose hope, and the merciless judge spared no blasphemer for breaking the Erdtree's law. One can only imagine how many were promised relief to go out confessions, only for the pagan and cohorts to all be subject to the same punishment anyway. No amount of repentance would move Praetor Rykard. Just as other officials made into provincial lords wore black mantles, his knights put on black surcoats to highlight his commitment to the darkest deeds in the far shadow of the Erdtree's light. That two-faced nature earned him revulsion, but there was no denying the devious snake's results. It might have surprised some considering how quickly he came to be appointed. From the number of Carian servants he brought with him, Rykard made the transition to Golden Order enforcer seemingly overnight, no sooner leaving his old manor than moving into a new one, taking the staff with him. He certainly had zeal, but it was insincere. The description for the Taker's cameo defines Rykard's ultimate descent to blasphemy. Although the English text mentions a turn to heresy, this simply refers to aforementioned apostasy, adopting a stance of rebellion against the regulation imposed by the Erdtree. Rykard was the first to abandon the principles of the Golden Order, choosing instead to blaspheme against the gods whom he was party to. Abrupt conversions are by no means inconceivable, but with how the sorcerer became the Erdtree's fiercest proponent, and then its most vehement opponent both at the drop of a hat, it is hard to see a devious liar's initial pivot toward faith as anything but opportunistic. To do evil in the name of rooting out evil, the prince was already well on his way to turning to evil. Rykard's enthusiasm for the Golden Order was clearly just to follow in his fundamentalist father's footsteps. It was ruthless ambition which motivated him, not love for principle. Is it any wonder those ambitions morphed? So, how does a demigod go from the model Carian prince to the staunchest fundamentalist to the worst blasphemer? The answer is that the sorcerer was never sincere with his adherence to the Golden Order, despite the affirmations of faith. Becoming an inquisitor and ruling over Volcano Manor were all just means to an end. After following the path of an enchanted knight for so long, the sorcerer left it all behind when his father remarried and soon after begun a renaissance in Erdtree religion. In fact, it was probably at his insistence that the king and queen decided to entrust the new demigod with the Inquisition. The question remains, however, why was Rykard so determined for a one-sided competition with his father, who prior had nothing to do with Knights of Caria? The prince's ardent ambition appeared to simply be born in the wake of Radagon's second marriage. Where was this interest in the red-haired hero beforehand? What demanded that he prove himself to his patriarch? To answer requires a peek into the depths of the man's duplicitous heart. The woman for he. Rykard took Tanith as his consort
I like
after
that
falling for her
a
at
lot
first
better,
sight.
for sure.
The circumstances to their encounter
The way
is
that
simple to
worded
surmise. Tanith was originally a foreign dancer who used castanets as part of their beautifully passionate dance. When trying to remind her of her past, Patches requests we hand her these castanets he implicitly found at Shaded Castle, where we find him at this juncture. This would posit that the castle was where the dancer left them behind before becoming the demigod's bride. In that case, it must have been there where Rykard witnessed her as she danced. House Murray is, of course, the premier executioner family in the Erdtree Kingdom, and with its seat at the border to Gelmir, their castle was sure to receive plenty of criminals to execute from Volcano Manor. It is logical for Rykard to attend more than a few banquets held at the castle as part of his lordly duties. And while he was discussing policy and agreements with Lord Murray and the other aristocrats, who would be brought out as the sideshow than a dancer? The foreigner was sure to be part of a traveling troupe, especially if her country was no longer around. Rana was where the dancers called home, its clear allusion to the Arabic Rana, versus, meaning eye-catching, already calling back to Tanith's encounter with Rykard. The shadow of the Erdtree DLC introduces us to a still active dancer of Rana, who performs an impassioned dance similar to the consort. Reminiscent of Arabic sword dancing, said dancer also wields a pair of decorative shamshir for her performance, curved blades both heavily reliant on dexterity, the very stat boosted by Tanith's mask. And under the mask depicting her country's queen, Tanith bears an eerily similar face to the dancer, including the exact same style of black hair. Taken together, Tanith undoubtedly belongs to that culture. What's more, the culture in question has a queen in seemingly another example of matriarchy. That by itself hints that this foreign place is still closer to home. The dancer of Rana stands captured by the southern mausoleum on an island furthest down the Cerulean coast. This indicates that she came from lands closest to that side of between, such as Caelid. For sure, Tanith at one point will reward us with the Serpent Bone Blade, a poisoned weapon clearly made in Gelmir to celebrate its snake worship. And yet, that sword is nonetheless a katana with a double slash skill, both traits of the Land of Reeds which spread to Caelid. And while the Tarnished may have increased the volumes of visitors from the Far East, nothing stops the Eastern influence in Caelid from beginning long before then. The fact that Moonveil and the Meteoric or Blade are both local katana reinforces that point. Elden Ring. Nitrain introduces a samurai who washed up on the lands between and joined the Crucible Knights before the Shattering. It wouldn't be odd then for Tanith to have the Serpent Bone Blade forged to such specifications, assuming that she was from the region. Rana's origin in Caelid would also be consistent with the women's culture. The fervor of their dancing is to capture the heat of a burning flame, with their vaguely Middle Eastern attire colored bright red for similar effect. Even their curved swords possess undulation to the blade, evoking twisting licks of flame. As the denouement, they use carefully hidden bottles of highly flammable perfumed oil to unleash waves of actual fire for their wowed audience. Perfumes can be made almost anywhere, but this particular technique resembles the scouring black flame performed by fallen fire monks. Rana may thereby preserve memory of the race which stoked flames before departing Caelid for the mountaintops, becoming another independent small country destroyed during the Fringefolk rebellion like Eocade. It would only take a small human clan living in the area at the time, which has precedent in the Zamor. Absent the giants, the tribe developed in a more feminine direction, where
I haven't done a reference image comparing the Black Flame monks to the Rana dancers art, so maybe I should do that. I have to look at the screenshots we have for that and maybe work on that. Yeah, that's something to note for the future.
women dancers fought and ruled whilst carrying on the fascination with flame. If war did destroy her home, it is only natural that Tanith become a traveling entertainer, using her talents to get by despite the loss. And if it was entertaining wealthy patrons, her troupe could do no better than the heartland of this new Erdtree Empire. That would explain what brought her all that way to the Shaded Castle, where she caught the eye of one demigod prince. Tanith wasn't trying to move up in the world by performing for nobles. A point Patches and various item descriptions reiterate is the woman's dignified manner, which she maintained even whilst dancing. The foreigner looked beautiful and dignified with her fiery movements, but not flirtatious. Her passion was pure from sensuality, and Tanith was never attracted to Rykard until after he was devoured by the Great Serpent. She didn't care to wear fine white silks or live in the lap of luxury. The only reason she became his consort was apparently because the demigod left her no choice. She was a commoner, he a prince. There was no refusing his marriage offer. Rykard wanted her, and so she discarded her castanets. For his part, Rykard didn't mind that Tanith never loved him. Back at his manor, the consort was allowed to wear the face of another woman, her queen. The one image of her true face appears on a cameo owned by her adopted daughter, Zariah's, a cut second cameo, ostensibly of her dancer days, highlights the less peaceful smile the dignified woman wore in this home life. On that note, Rykard never sired offspring with his consort despite being one of the few demigods known to be married. The cut iteration of Daedakar's woe even reveals plans for the then effeminate man to be one of a number of paramours, Rykard's evident proclivities suggesting that he would be more than happy to look elsewhere for his carnal needs. It is obvious that he wanted to keep his beloved around while never expecting her to indulge his affections. Tanith was no different from any other luxury in his manor, a decorative doll for the praetor to admire like the missing portrait of her existing in the game files. Except this doll, with her love of flame, may well have stirred in her husband an intrigue, which changed both their lives forever. A mother's love. Somewhere down the line, Rykard decided to commit blasphemy. What inspired this was, more than likely, his job. Day in and day out, the Inquisitor listened to confessions from pagans, detailing their sinful beliefs and practices. The information may have been piecemeal, but the account would eventually present a fuller picture of this peculiar cult that he was tasked with stamping out. That alone might have tickled his sorcerer's curiosity. After all, he was the outsider there, and for all his arrogance, his work was still to question, what was this power that so many were willing to die for? Seeing so many martyrs, it may have been inevitable that the praetor began looking deeper into the ancient faith. And drawing upon all his discoveries, the prince ended up adopting their rebellion, even reviving Gelmir's pagan conjury, as sorcery, of course. One might think that recreating lava arts would be less of an achievement on a volcano, but that assumes that the volcano was still active. Currently, we see how the lava flows out from Volcano Manor, sinking the lower half of the prison town directly in its path. The town accounted for this magma flow with arches or the vertical lift bridge whose metal can withstand the intense heat, so if part of town lay in the way, it could only be if the settlement expanded while there was no lava. In other words, the volcano wasn't always active. The minor Erdtree on the other side of the seething river reaffirms this impression. The heat and resulting sulfur formations have all but killed the thing, with even the flowers growing at its base huing purple instead of gold. In response, its roots grow wildly all the way up the nearby precipice, but it has found no succor. The additional tree spirit spawning as we pass by implies that it has only suffered this more recently, and it would be impossible for the tree to grow in the first place if these were its circumstances from the moment the golden seed touched soil. The same holds true for trees and grass around town, when flowers are used for interior decorating. In both cases, volcanic heat is the commonality. Therefore, lava wasn't heating surrounding land at the age of Thundy's decline, after the snake god was hunted. Considering that the Great Snake is the source of magma then and now, its death naturally leads to staunching the lava flow. It may not be immediate, as we can still witness the molten rock even after killing the snake ourselves, but it must have eventually cooled. The Fire Mountain then became just a mountain during the Crucible's last days, allowing a minor Erd tree to grow and the town to be expanded into the old area. The only question are the volcanic stones, which are used liberally for torchlight throughout the castle town. This practice began as early as the creation of Gelmir Hero's grave, and it was probably employed by the pagans before that. It is possible that everyone merely relied on reserves from before the volcano went dormant. But with the volcano active again, it may just be that the trend has recently resurged. Reichard's Manor does hang paintings of its own interior with this volcanic stone torch burning, so it may be a subtle celebration of the volcano returning to form. Regardless, there was no lava for reference when Reichard began his investigation into the volcano's history. The man had only what he could glean from the populace or relics. From that, he was still able to reconstruct arts like magma shot, making it quite the achievement. Granted, it helps that he had cultivated a background of faith, for as the Thorn sorcerers prove, it is relatively easy to derive sorcery from hexing by simply including faith in the formulation. Using his experience with golden holiness, the Carian prince derived new arts of molten rock. However, by this point, lava was likely already returning to the mountain, giving him a point of reference. The sigil for these sorceries depicts Reichard after he has become one with the Great Snake, indicating their invention since he was devoured. Factored as a whole, the sorcerer more likely developed them as a consequence of restoring the volcano, referencing the lava his body was producing as it grew with that burning power. But to have that help, he must first seek it out. And eventually, Reichard came in contact with the pagan serpent deity. Because of the reptile's immortality, it is no surprise that it survived being hunted so long ago. Tanith's attempt to replace Reichard as the snake by devouring his remaining head shows a means for the snake to return in new forms. While the slain demigod's consciousness might remain forever dormant, the essence of he and the myriad more assimilated into the snake's being can persist in some sense, feeding the god's essence. The finger creepers progenerated from the ringed finger likewise show how new life forms can derive from that essence. That being so, what stops one of these parts from reconstituting a new snake? Perhaps it would require another animal to first eat the essence and transform, or maybe the vestiges of life are able to birth a new body from the carcass, given enough time. Either way, the god would be reborn. From the introductory cutscene, that snake would be nowhere near its former size. But that would make it all the easier for the beast to slip through the cracks, hiding in the shadowy crags of Gelmir, biding its time, eating small vermin. The exact means might be deduced from an inconspicuous detail. Recall that one of the snake men in the manor styles himself a king on Reichard's throne, with a comically oversized eggshell as his crown. Why is that to symbolize a right to rule? Because it serves as proof of lineage to the great serpent. But if the man-serpents are born from the god's amnion, then the egg must not have hatched this new king, but his predecessor, the Serpent King, more specifically, the Serpent King Reichard has merged with. An egg of such scale would hatch a snake the size of a large python, matching the deity seen in the cutscene. Given that the reptile is regarded as elderly, it must have hatched from that egg long ago. Perhaps when disposing of the god's original remains, Erd tree forces overlooked the large egg forming inside its more massive body. That egg hatched before the corpse was taken away, its occupant slithering off below everyone's noticed. It was then only discovered after the praetor inspected the pieces like his stepmother before him, the demigod bringing back the shell and eventually the god. By the time Reichard found the serpent, the creature was still nowhere near big or strong enough to challenge the gods. Without the institutional support of the pagan community, the flesh and blood available to consume was simply not consistent enough. Considering how ordinary snakes can go months without food, the old deity might have even rarely eaten anything in those intervening years. Whether or not that left the snake truly vulnerable, it was doubtless in an unenviable position. If the praetor so chose, he might have sealed the creature away in the name of the Golden Order and be celebrated for preventing the second coming of a false god, adding to his prestige. But that isn't what happened. Instead, Reichard ended up swayed by the snake, becoming a recusant. If he ever intended to merely study the monster as a curiosity, that fell by the wayside as he learned more. In the god, he saw the potential to overthrow the Erd tree order, and that led to betraying his kin for a new family. The prince recognizes that the path he walks guarantees that he will be loathed for sin, but he doesn't particularly mind those sins. The Taker's cameo engraved with his austere portrait has the same effect as his holy sword, infused with the snake's blasphemous flesh and flames, stealing life from the foes it slays to heal the wielder. Just as the hands of assimilated heroes reach out from the sword and in the portrait. This represents Reichard's commitment to take and add to himself, pillaging justified on account of the gods being no different, as even Morgott would agree. Taking by force was the way of demigods spoiled by the Erd tree's blessings. Those who become part of his family, with the snake ironically feel the same, wrongly robbed of life by Reichard. That is why it is their squirming grasps reaching out for more bodies according to the cameo. No matter how noble they present, everyone can and will take from others when they are desperate, and that shared will serves as proof that Reichard's sins are not so antithetical to the human condition. Why should we pretend ourselves beyond greed? Although entirely self-serving, the praetor could argue that he was only enacting his duty as a judge. By his judgment, the regulations of the Golden Order were guilty of hypocrisy and perverting the natural order. Who was the Erd tree to pick favorites? All men should be afforded the greed to take what lies within their capabilities. Was it not life's right to be free as seen at the start of gold? Even if just an excuse for depravity, the demigod's rebellion might be viewed as simply asking for restitution from gods who abused their authority to lord over the masses. In Reichard's proposed ideal, they would all be a warm family, not the cold hierarchy of the Eternal Queen's world. And in order to bring that about, he needed to stand above all other rulers, become the supreme king of this world, an autocrat with the will to impose this more equitable future. Initially, Reichard's ambition, or wild heart, was the aspiration, or heroic heart, for something so noble. In his adjudication, sin and blasphemy were just false labels for those fighting for a better world. Cut dialogue further substantiates this rationale, with the boss addressing those responsible for making men gods and manipulating them as their puppets in swearing rebellion against the system. This shows understanding that his ultimate enemy isn't Marika and Radagon, but the greater will and its agents behind them. That is far more high-minded and nuanced than a simple rejection of kin for limiting his depravity, so it is possible that Reichard saw the bigger picture. Admittedly, this dialogue would have occurred after he was already part of the Great Snake, making it possibly knowledge that he only obtained after being assimilated. The demigod does receive a vision of the beast while he is eaten, likely sharing in the god's thoughts or memories as they become one flesh. Waging war on all earthly creation for the heavens part in it would be more aligned with the serpent's existing goals. That may be the real source of Reichard's venom toward the Golden Order's architects. Regardless, it presents a more principled stance for Reichard. The aspiring king must have given his Ultima Ratio Regum some forethought. Still, there can be no...
Let's see, okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. That sounded wrong for me for a second.
Regardless, it presents a more principled stance for Reichard. The aspiring king must have given his Ultima Ratio Regum some forethought. Still, there can be no separating this fervent desire to be the supreme king from the demigod's one-sided rivalry with Radagon. If the Elden Throne made the father king of the world, then the son craved becoming the true king of this earth. Such a greedy man always had reason to despise the Erdtree gods and want to see them toppled. The Great Serpent simply enabled him to express these repressed desires with the deity's liberating promise for his fate. Taken in that light, everything else about the blasphemy was ultimately a post hoc rationalization to justify Rykard's selfishness. The question then was why the sudden shift after his father's remarriage. Was he really just that desperate to emulate Radagon? But his father had no discernible effect on his life growing up, at least not until after the red-haired hero abandoned his mother to become consort to the Erdtree goddess. Certainly, the betrayal of Renala lying at the root of Rykard's blasphemy is conceivable. What did Rykard feel, seeing Radagon leave his mother broken and distraught, desperately clamoring for his affections? If he idolized the woman as a child, then perhaps a lingering bitterness. How does a demigod go from the model Carian prince to the staunchest fundamentalist to the worst blasphemer? By tearing apart his happy family, apparently. Even still, it wouldn't explain the desire to become more like Radagon. But maybe it was never about how his father felt about the changes, but about his mother. Indeed, his beloved Tanith had one standout feature when she was still a dancer: her black hair. As consort, she wears the regal face of a queen, befitting King Rykard. But that mask nonetheless gives Queen Tanith a rounder face, smaller nose and lips, and thinner brows, all traits that let her more closely resemble Renala. Taken together, it is almost as if the Praetor wanted to imagine that he wasn't marrying the dancer of Rana, but his mother. In other words, Rykard may have developed a classic Oedipus complex. Through this lens, the Lord of Volcano Manor's ultimate indifference to depravity was because he was already depraved himself. Why did he start on the path of sword and sorcery? Because he wanted to be his mother's knight. Why did he pivot to fundamentalism? Because he wanted to be her beloved. Why pretend as if he owned red hair? Because that was the color the Caria Queen liked. Why live like an extravagant king? Because she still loved that man on the highest throne. Why instantly fall for a black-haired dancer making no attempts at flattery? Because her dignified appearance reminded him of the heroic witch. Why not care if his consort returned his affections? Because he never could have those from the woman he wanted anyway. Why sympathize with an all-devouring serpent? Because he saw in the broken matriarch rejected by her love, his own mother. Everything was just an expression of the prince's deep-seated craving for his mother's attention. Rykard loved his mother, and he envied his father for receiving all of her love. Seeing how her heart was still hopelessly set on Radagon, the son did everything to turn her attention, becoming the kind of man she's...
I also want to point out that Rykard is, by all indications, the oldest of the three Carian siblings. So you have essentially the case where he's born first, he's quote-unquote the only child, right? So his formative years are growing up where he has all of his mommy's attention, right? Because, you know, he's a baby, he needs it. But then he gets a little older, right? And then suddenly he loses mommy's attention because now he's got his little brother Radon, and then his youngest his youngest sister Rani, and stuff like that. So I think that also plays a role into it. Now I'm not mentioning that here because again we talk about the order of the siblings and ages and stuff with regards to Radon, where I think it's more relevant. But I think it is just something kind of worth kind of observing, that like, yeah, that might also kind of be playing into it. And obviously it crystallizes into his daddy issues when the whole abandonment part happens, right? Because then it's like, well, now it's not just mommy's now paying attention to my siblings and not me. It's now mommy's only paying attention to daddy, even though daddy treats her so badly, right? So just interesting thought on this very depraved man.
Supposedly wanted. No amount of masks, both physical and metaphorical, would ever change their dynamic, however, and Rykard himself was aware of that, deep down. And so, he sought comfort in a woman who was like his mother, who would never love him either, but still let him indulge his subconscious fantasy. That lit a fire in his heart that slowly came to consume him, the envy for what he could never have warping into a wrath for what denied him his fantasy. Of course,
hello?
that ire wouldn't be satisfied with cruel tortures. Upon encountering the immortal snake, the greedy demigod saw a new mother to raise and care for, a mother who would be finally consumed with him. And together, they would have vengeance on the gods who wronged them.
Okay.
Still deceived with ornament. Once aligned with the snake, Rykard was keen to undermine the Erdtree kingdom. After the fragments were stolen from Malekith, a portion of the Rune of Death was infused in a piece of white rock and gifted to Rykard. This was a reward from his sister, which begs the question of what the demigod did to merit it. The tool is named Blasphemous Claw, though a cut iteration of the description recognizes the stone's shape to also resemble a shield. That is perfect for how the amulet with a familiar crack can be used to parry Malekith's sword whenever the beast draws upon the power of destined death to attack, much to his disorientation. The partial power was weaponized into a kind of white barrier that repels its same energy, perfect for the time Rykard executes his blasphemy against Marika and the gods. Rani awarding this trump card for that express end betrays recognition of her brother's future intentions. In turn, it implies that Rykard is himself aware of his sister's treasonous intentions against their stepmother. The only reason to be rewarded then is because they are working together for each other's benefit. Put simply, Rykard was roped into the Black Knives conspiracy. After discovering his plans for rebellion during a family visit or other means, Rani shared her own plot to kill demigods and offered him a portion of destined death in exchange for his support. Specifically, this support came in the form of setting up Malekith for ambush. The witch's brother is the Lord of Volcano Manor, where Malekith...
Alright, 1 second, chat. I want to focus purely on this because this is a very specific shot I just thought of grabbing now. Yeah. Many such cases amongst royalty. Yeah. Alright, so it's basically... I think something like this. Let me lock this in place. What do you think, chat? Let me hide this. I think this is a good comparison shot because I use the standard Snake Man currently. Uh-oh, Doggo wants to leave. 1 second. The world is your oyster, dog. Don't let me stop you. Okay. Babies. Yeah, I guess they are babies. Anyway, so I think this is a good shot for God Hunts when we're talking about comparisons, because obviously there's the more obvious green eye with Zorias and the more reddish skin. So I think this is probably the best. I think maybe we can, let me take a shot here, but there we go. I think this captures, I think this captures what we want. What is it? What is it, Sonny? Why are you licking my leg suddenly? What's wrong? You come back here just to lick me? What's wrong, girl? What's got you bugged? 1 second, chat. I'm gonna see what's bugging her. All right, she just wanted to be let out. Okay, so I may have to be checking up in her shortly because I do not trust it when it's this late to let her out for too long. Okay. Okay. We do need to get back in here though with her, so with Zorias, I mean. Elden Ring's a perfect game with no flaws in it whatsoever, chat. Always remember that. You may think that is a flaw, but no, it is perfection. Nope. All right. Let's get back to
helped
it.
suppress the previous blasphemous rebellion against the God Queen. With her concern about the pagans, it is reasonable for the vassal beast to periodically check in on the Inquisition on Marika's behalf, confirm that she need not worry about another uprising from those who survived the Great Serpent. As the gracious host during the beast's stay, Rykard would be in the position to alert Runny of this visit in advance. Then, she could mobilize Alecto's crew by the time the Black Blade made his return, intercepting him mid-route. Malekith would appear to have been jumped by mysterious highwaymen, with no risk of Kuria's involvement being discovered. This scenario would also explain the vassal beast's delay to report the lost rune pieces to Lindel. Surely, his first instinct was to track down and retrieve the portions of his sword before anything else, hoping to mitigate this blunder. But after Malekith's attackers escaped, the beast was liable to seek help with the tracking, before their trail truly ran cold. This would require that he report the incident to local forces patrolling the territory, who would report the matter to their lord. If that lord was Rykard, then he would naturally take charge of the investigation and thereby detain Malekith for questioning about his robbers. This gave the assassins a small window to execute the murders, long enough for Rykard to figure out what was going on before they sent word back to Lindel. The conspiracy couldn't trust such interference to distract for more than the night, hence their continued need to act quickly. Nonetheless, it would leave their biggest variable in the hands of the Grand Deceiver himself. This was the role that only Rykard could play. After the Carian Prince earned his reward, Runny would engrave death into the blasphemous claw along with the daggers that same night. She then need only deliver the claw to Rykard while the new Black Knife assassins went on their way to murder their respective targets. This could be easily accomplished by sending one assassin on funeral horseback as a covert messenger. And now that the Carian siblings both got what they wanted out of this conspiracy, the Black Knives were disposable. If Rykard controlled Malekith's return home that night, then he may be why Godwyn's assassins were discovered prematurely and nearly killed. Perhaps Runny and he had themselves conspired without the assassin's knowledge, or perhaps the devilish snake broke from the plan, forcing his sister's hand. Either way, Rykard betrayed Alecto, too, that night. The scheme was easy enough to execute. After receiving his reward from Renly, Rykard could do something as simple as kill the messenger and claim to have been attacked. As infamous as the Knight of the Black Knives is, Rogier shouldn't know the details about the assassin's background and equipment unless authorities closely examine the specimen. Dead men tell no tales, so the only risk of Rykard supplying a corpse as proof was the magic print left on the knife. However, Rogier suggests that he can only decipher the right signature because his body is afflicted by the curse of death. Barring another skilled sorcerer with his specific circumstance, no one could have untangled the truth of the conspiracy from a magic partially fueled by destined death. It was safe to show others the knife. In short, it is possible for the conspiracy to present a body, betraying the plot as it was being enacted. Malekith would recognize the power of his sword in the assassin's dagger and should connect the dots. Either way, he might be alerted of the danger to the gods, especially Marika, and rush home to her.
I think I have to be careful of either way. I feel like I may be relying on too much, but we'll see with the control F in a sec. 1 second. BRB. Okay, nope, she still wants to be outside. Okay, I'm gonna leave her to it then. All right, let's see.
By the end of the night, the assassins would be dead or scattered to the wind as fugitives, and none would suspect the Praetor's part in this high treason. Whether or not he and Renly were—
All right, now she wants in. Okay. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, yeah, we don't need to worry about you anymore. Let's just focus on this.
acting in concert by the end, neither would betray the other to Leyndell. Instead, when Marika unexpectedly chose to shatter the Elden Ring, both claimed their own great rune and contested other demigods becoming Radagon's successor. Rykard obviously hadn't planned for the queen to get herself imprisoned inside the Erdtree, pushing Malekith into self-imposed exile. While this defeated the purpose of his trump card, the Inquisitor still kept the Blasphemous Claw as insurance and added a great rune to his tools for opposing order. It is unlikely that this was some new intrigue by the conspiracy, though they may have still been secretly coordinating. Realizing the implications, Rykard took hold of Fraction of the Elden Lord's legitimacy in anticipation of the fight ahead. His father also removed from the equation, this was the perfect opportunity to snub him by taking his throne. For this, he needed a bigger backing. We can find numerous citizen conscripts within Volcano Manor's castle town, proof that another faction devoted to the Erdtree was forming under the Praetor's banner. This trust in the demigod was unfounded, of course. Paintings of the Erdtree burning currently hang inside the manor, and his cameo features snakes biting its symbol seen on the dueling shield. King Rykard's vie for Elden Lord was nothing more than a farce, a way to better access the Golden Order he hoped to destroy. But the faithful's trust in the Inquisition was a resource he could harness for political momentum. His nobles, knights, and soldiers might hear him speak of creating a more just society, even if that justice might consider blasphemy under the current regime. His plans to burn down the current order entirely, not so much. Evidently, these parties all agreed with the Justicier's stated vision for the future, inspired by his heroic aspirations. Under the pretense of noble ambitions, they rallied behind him with an army to compete with the other Shardbearers. But before anyone came to heads, Morgott stepped in and negotiated an alliance. More than likely, Rykard agreed just to buy time for another opportunity, conspirators sitting alongside one another as they argued their claim to the Elden throne the Omen sat upon. Meanwhile, the Praetor continued to build up his forces in preparation for war, maneuvering every which way for the coming day of blasphemy. With the Alliance in deadlock, there was only one way he would ever gain access to the Erdtree, and it was no longer through the Elden throne. The others were no different, and by the time the second defense of Leyndell had concluded, Rykard recognized that his kingdom officially plunged into a civil war. While everyone else tangled with each other to their detriment, he and his forces would swoop in to take it all. Having no more need to hide his intentions, the blasphemer would finally reveal himself to the world. One might then immediately
Yeah, I prefer you here, Sonny. Don't go barking at random crap. There we go. Okay. Okay, I'm back, chat. All right, now where were we?
The question why the demigod chose to feed himself to the serpent deity, Great Rune and all. This is especially curious when the rune's Japanese description highlights its own greatness. One might then but before anyone came to heads, Morgott stepped in and negotiated an alliance. More than likely, Rykard agreed just to buy time for another opportunity, conspirators sitting alongside one another as they argued their claim to the Elden throne the Omen sat upon. Meanwhile, the Praetor continued to build up his forces in preparation for war, maneuvering every which way for the coming day of blasphemy. With the alliance in deadlock, there was only one way he would ever gain access to the Erdtree, and it was no longer through the Elden throne. The others were no different, and by the time the second defense of Leyndell had concluded, Rykard recognized that his kingdom officially plunged into a civil war. While everyone else tangled with each other to their detriment, he and his forces would swoop in to take it all. Having no more need to hide his intentions, the blasphemer would finally reveal himself to the world. One might then immediately question why the demigod chose to feed himself to the serpent deity, Great Rune and all. This is especially curious when the rune's Japanese description highlights its own greatness, putting aside its size. Was his shard of the Elden Ring so impressive to be singled out in this way? It is possible, given that the rune still appears comparable to the others even after being twisted and partially digested within the serpent, and how fitting that the undulating string of gold shards, barely holding together amidst the pale power already broken down, even resembles a green snake. The Great Rune has undeniably been transformed by the pagan god, with its blessing exposing how it became as much part of the snake as of the Elden Ring. But if Rykard just wanted to share his Great Rune's power, he didn't need to offer himself along with it. He wanted to be devoured by the snake, any benefits from the Great Rune serving merely as a bonus. And his reasons were surprisingly practical. According to the description of his remembrance, the Praetor became the Great Snake in order to have eternal life and continue growing while eating. As he apparently once explained, he understood how long and rugged the road of blasphemy was. Even with the civil war, the gods were powerful forces, and overcoming them would be no simple feat to see this golden order torn down. He needed to survive, and for that he needed power. But his own was obviously insufficient. There were plenty of shard bearers, many more impressive than him as fighters. A child of gold needed to look outside blessings for power. If he wanted to walk down that path, he needed to embrace sin. And if he always wanted a mother to be consumed with him, this was his chance to let her consume him. And so, the greedy demigod assimilated with the gluttonous god.
I am currently listening to Covenant Swing Sovereign Marriage Electro Swing March by the channel's called Swing Swing Swing. Very cool channel. You guys should check it out and subscribe. So yeah, better give that a like. I love the music they come out with. All right, let's 1 second, chat. I got this dog playing tug of war with me.
Body slowly devoured until his essence fully merged. During the process, Rykard glimpsed a vision of the future. As he neared death in his old form, the demigod saw the great snake devouring the world, the deity's dream which the man assuredly witnessed as part of his merging with the creature. Still, it was a prophecy which Rykard fully intended to fulfill. Gelmir's war banners, sorcery sigils, even letter seals, all feature this image of Rykard as the snake, his head being crowned as their jaws ready to swallow the globe. The former shardbearer intended to spend his eternity devouring every last bit of wretched creation if it meant toppling the Erdtree's order, becoming the ruler of blasphemy in its place. For that reason, a king's scepter has been fashioned, depicting this seminal event for when Rykard finally raises it for that next step. Until then, he must still contend with the so-called gods, but he has the will and now the means to do so. After all, the Devourer's scepter shows a myriad of hands holding up the world to the snake gripping them. Many would be needed to realize that ambition, together, the Prince of Gold the critical first of this family. Between himself and the Great Rune for sustenance, the immortal snake already began growing rapidly, and Rykard along with it. Much like his predecessor, the Praetor has sprouted new limbs out of the snake's elongated body, his face emerging from its throat. Even his sword has reached comical size sitting inside its gullet, ready for the giant ring fingers to pull it out of the snake's throat at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, the serpent was shedding its skin even as it was still munching on the demigod's head, which looks to have been served on a platter somewhere within Volcano Manor for the beast's convenience. As seen in the introductory cutscene, the eggs the god laid were placed on a separate platter while they quickly hatched, highlighting the revitalization of this immortal creature. And with that comes the body heat, which once melted the stone beneath its belly. Through that, the sorcerer reborn as the snake would finally revive the old hexes of Gelmir. But more importantly, he achieved his desired eternity, his strength of will enabling him to subsume control over the base serpent. Before all this, Rykard gifted Tanith the tonic of forgetfulness. This secret medicine inside a small copper bottle wipes clean all painful memories, freeing the drinker of their mental agony. The Praetor most likely invented this drug with perfuming, as the menu graphic reveals a branch burning inside the bottle to create its sweet fumes. For collaborators, there are the resident Omen killers, who used a similar drug to wipe out all emotion. But regardless of his religious connections to draw upon, the blasphemer's intentions for Tanith are obvious. As he was about to embark on becoming a total monster, reveling in sin for his ambitions, Rykard wanted his wife to choose another path. Despite the circumstances surrounding their marriage, she was still his beloved. In the loving embrace of his new mother, he no longer had need for fantasies. The woman indulged his selfishness long enough. It was time to be free of him and live happily. While he followed the road of blasphemy and sin, she could go down the side of the fork none the wiser. This was her chance to leave him and never look back. But Tanith never drank the elixir. Rather, it was only after seeing him becoming a great snake that Tanith felt any attraction. The dancer of Ranna always revered flame and the passion of men. Seeing his heart go wild with ambition, and that will catalyze a flame which melts the very stone, it melted her heart. The tonic's description captures her sentiment. There was no greater anguish than forgetting her king. This was the demigod she wanted to marry, not a man satisfied with just having her there as a prop. Perhaps she didn't believe in his sincerity, crusading against the Erdtree for trampling the weak, until that moment. Now he was her hero, finally showing potential to be king of the world, letting his fire burn the old world in impassioned fury. How could she not stand as witness to him realizing that? Tanith takes her name from the great mother goddess of Carthage, whose name means the Serpent Lady, and so the Lord of Blasphemy's consort chose to stand in solidarity with the immortal serpent. If sin was the only way to realize Rykard's aspirations, then they would be sinners together. It wasn't just her. Gelmir's knights also remained loyal to Rykard after this incident. Their order embraced flame, adopting skills like eruption to control the lava resurging from the volcano since the snake's return. Clearly, becoming an open blasphemer in league with the Golden Order's most hated adversary didn't deter them in the slightest. If anything, the knights were enthusiastic to bring fire back to the Fire Mount. Volcano Manor no longer hides their intent to burn the Erdtree, but the knights were seemingly satisfied so long as that meant wiping the slate clean. From Tanith's account, Rykard acted outraged at demigods shamefully scrounging for handouts from the Erdtree, just to be forced into competition with each other for more power, a mockery to all. Rather than one another, the Golden Tree was the real obstacle for a new kind of order founded upon justice for all, and the snake's flames were the means to remove it. If that was the path their lord and leech chose, then rebellion it is. They would...
She truly did match his freak, yeah. Again, I'm noticing a pattern here with Gelmir, where all the stuff involving the snake turns into really sick shit involving characters and relationships with each other. Like it's beautifully fucked up. I always love Elden Ring lore. Yeah, I always I love writing it. It's like I said, it's not my passion like it is for Dark Souls, but I do enjoy Elden Ring. There we go, doggo. So I feel like this stuff with Rykard as well, I ended up being a lot more proud of it than I expected I would be. I wouldn't say I'm particularly attached to Rykard's character necessarily, but I feel it's like Radahn, where I have a new appreciation for the character in terms of the larger narrative and everything. Whereas Radahn is a deconstruction of like heroism and stuff like that. Rykard is really a deconstruction of depravity, right? And it's really interesting to see. Like I said, it's really interesting to kind of like go through the breakdown and the dissection, right? Where there's just so much, right? That like I didn't even realize until like I got through. I'm like, oh my god, there's just like so much to this, even though it feels like something you could like summarize like very simply and being like, everyone acted depraved and shit, right? Thanks, Bandit the Hawk. I'm glad you enjoy it too. Ooh. Sorry, chat. I'm trying to talk to you all while this dog is wanting me. She's a puller. She's going to training soon. I can't wait. We're gonna make sure we turn her into a proper upstanding dog of society. I saw you. You were about to jump on my lap to try to win this, weren't you, doggo? You were like, no, I would not let you win. It's so funny too, because as soon as I let go, she'll like immediately try to hand it back to me, but you're like, no, please, I beg you, keep pulling. What did Miyazaki say he loved about Rykard again? I actually don't know, but I'll look into that, Xavier, because if it's relevant, I will actually include it in the analysis. That said, if I had to guess, it's probably like if I was Miyazaki, what would I say I liked about Rykard? I would probably say it's his strength of will and his ambition, like the fact that he is like, you know, he's absolutely determined to do what he with the idea that he has these aspirations where he's absolutely determined to do what he must do come hell or high water, right? Now you could argue that kind of falls by the wayside, right? Obviously the whole idea of him falling to like base greed and stuff and him kind of languishing and things like that, but there's still that idea that, you know, he's gone to he's crossed the point of no return, right? Like he's doing this, right? And even if he's going about it maybe not the most proactive way possible, right? He's not he's kind of languishing now that he's gotten a lot of what he wants. There's still that aspect of like, you know, he's determined to impose this this new vision for the world, no matter how awful it might be. Anyway, let's get back to this.
Shoulder everything for such noble ambitions, including the label of blasphemy. Loose the demons from hell. After their Carian leader united with his found family and secured his follower base's continued support, the Inquisition's policy changed seemingly overnight. Countless have been stuffed in the cages and cells throughout the castle town, the prisoners becoming the new prison wardens wielding torch poles from their rooftop lookouts. The ones imprisoned were now faithful like the conscripts, whose daggers have been confiscated for the warden's use. The inmates are now running the asylum, and the Inquisitors like Giza do nothing to stop it. Instead, the Sawblade maniac has joined in on the revelry, invading us in the manor's dining hall even as a recusant. We can therefore assume that all the bodies in the streets, newfound strays scavenging in alleys, is as intended. The Inquisition chooses to torture those who cling to their Erdtree seal, missionary cookbook, or gold smithing stone, allowing the oppressed pagans payback. One might question why when they are the Erdtree Queen's officials. Their reasons, however, are not so much loyalty to the Praetor as it is because they are unhinged. Consider the sort to perform blatant and needless acts cruelty before this point. Even if for the greater good, that level of power over another tends to attract those who would abuse it as a personal outlet. Officials willing to perform such dubious tasks for Marika are all but guaranteed to be the more illicit sort, individuals with no scruples or just a touch disturbed. Giza is a prime example, his heavily scarred head wrapped in bloody bandages, likely his own handiwork when considering his obsession with serrated edges. If Giza was willing to rip his own flesh to test his new favorite torture device, one can only imagine how many other Inquisitors might be similarly psychotic. In that case, Rykard had a small army of reprobates given the keys to express their villainy in the name of justice. These underlings don't care that their lord has now switched sides. If anything, that freedom from moral pretense allowed them to let loose their vile artistry upon whoever they chose. The Omen Killers were also exempt from this crackdown on orthodoxy, one burning conscripts at the stake with a pile of corpses. Like the Inquisition, they feel nothing about who they butcher, regardless of backgrounds. With their hearts crushed, the butchers only tether to Erdtree religion is logical principle, and in their current circumstance, assisting the Inquisition with its blasphemy is the most effective way to achieve their end goals. Take another Omen Killer's treatment of the Albinorics in the guest house, busy turning visitation
Sorry, chat. She's always so needy. I know she's always so needy. 24/7. This their degeneracy truly makes them hard to sympathize with, which is great narratively, as the player is likely to look for a banner to rally behind in opposition to the Golden Ark. Yeah, again, I think the way they handle is very good, right? Like I said, I think when you dig down, you can see like a ideology, you can see someone rooting for, as far as the recusants would be championing. But obviously, it's all under false pretenses. And I think that is. Like you said, it's an interesting way to dynamics. There probably is a lot of people who are like, nah, I want to be the rebel. I don't want to be like part of this all golden order. Like, it's obviously a bunch of tripe or whatever, right? And that kind of like feeds on people's natural inclination there, and then you don't realize what you've really gotten yourself into until it's too late. It's especially good because they hide the depravity, like with the way Tanith and Raya like teleport you around and stuff like that. Like if you're not exploring that much, you won't realize, like, you can go through the entire recusant quest with theoretically never seeing the interior of Volcano Manor or the battlefield on Gelmir, right? So it's a really subtle way to kind of like play onto people, as well as play into it for explorers, kind of like you being able to find all the different layers and hidden stuff going on. When he wrote them, he was really envisioning something a little bit more human, a little bit more traditional human drama and fantasy characters, so I hope he gets a kick out of that. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that with the demigods and stuff, because there's a lot of personal relationships and things, and like, betrayals and backstabs and stuff going on there. This is probably what that one person was remembering when they said they were originally human by Martin. Ah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, obviously there's a difference between calling them human and saying they have human drama. Yeah. Same thing with other games with like Dark Rays, Londor, Mensis. Like all of them are. Again, there's just FromSoft is just really good at this type of this type of storytelling. They always make sure to couch it so you actually have to think beyond just what the individual proponents are saying, but what the actual principles and ideology, if it's worth championing or not, you know? Okay.
Into a more permanent stay. Alongside humans, the old carrion servants have been stripped bare and tormented to the point of madness, and the albinoric mask looted from a sinner on a guillotine includes the second-generation servants in this insanity as well. That aside, the omen killer in the same room has apparently misidentified some sick individual making a mockery of a poor silver by wearing his face, treating this fellow psycho as if he were genuine corrupted prey. Nothing better captures the anarchy inside Volcano Manor's walls, where anyone might end up terrorized.
Well, we're waiting. Ahem. Well, what happened here? Huh? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, it's not like there's something weird. Let's do this.
Such malice toward the albinorics in particular have sent the other servants. Such malice toward the albinorics in particular.
I put it here. I put it here on the that side, and it went whatever.
Such malice toward the albinorics in particular have sent the other servants into hiding, many both mad and sane retreating to the recesses of the castle facilities. Others trapped at the center of this madness have put up more of a fight, leaving entire inquisition chambers in the manor's wings and watchtowers destroyed in their efforts to resist capture or recapture. Their valiant effort has earned them some relief, as the manor has decided to just cordon off the area with an in-statue seal and leave the fools to their fears in the darkness with their cages. But consistent in all of this is that their carrion master has abandoned them just as much as the Erdtree faithful's demigod has forsaken them. One with a furrow-calling finger remedy may pray to the Erdtree for deliverance, but none will come. For all intents and purposes, it is every man for himself in absolute bedlam, with Rykard's army of soldiers and inquisitors there to tip the scales in the pagan's favor. Not all on Team Recusant were afforded the same luxuries, of course. The Inquisitor's Girandol has since been used to torture nobles, and the nobles roaming free within Volcano Manor cower amidst all the torture devices when not absently staring at the lava spouting up from the Snake God's cavern. It seems all those powerless nobles who backed Rykard in the hopes of a better future in his promised world have found themselves subject to the whims of the Inquisitors. Whether or not they still supported his blasphemy was irrelevant at this point. They are trapped as his minions' playthings. The only exceptions are those who left with their pages on an expedition to the Gelmir hero's grave, still digging for power from the old champions of blasphemy. With them are a now dead knight and the Red Wolf, Rykard presumably bringing his father's gift along with the servants. If those two oversaw the escort, then clearly the party left before the manor began to turn on their helpless allies in the aristocracy. The knights were also doubtless not universal in their support for their blasphemous lord, though they and the soldiers under their command have already been subject to a worse fate. As the roles of heresy and orthodoxy flipped on their heads, the heroes amongst the faithful were granted an audience, with their new king nestled in the depths of the volcano once more. Flesh and bone piles up in Rykard's throne room preceding the way gate to the boss. Countless more litter the boss room, scorched black by the volcanic heat along with the larger and larger snakeskins covering them as cages hang from chandeliers overhead. There is a reason that the cookbook in the area details how to craft holy-proof dried liver. Rykard has used this opportunity to devour the faithful, making their power his food for growth. The offerings likely include every prisoner executed, with bones and living jars in the cemetery suggesting that even the dead have been dug up to tide over the Serpent King's weight for more heroes. This led to the gargantuan snake we see today, with all of Rykard's new limbs bursting out. Meanwhile, those with an audience join the family, becoming the vengeful wraiths whose heroic spirits burn with righteous fury, adding fuel to the snake's flame. Rykard has learned to coax out these spirits, whether from within or without. As proof of mastery, the man synchronizes the wraiths unleashed from the ground with his own to attack, his holy blade covered with hero flesh benefits its owner in similar manner. Despite the familial framing, there is no choice in becoming part of the serpent's same blood, as the squirming hands of amalgamated flesh demonstrate. Indeed, the nature of these audiences with the king is evident in cut dialogue, showing the developer's struggle between calling us a sacrifice or family for Rykard's introduction and victory speech. The heroes up until now have been little more than offerings, fueling the serpent's return. If anything, the colorful wording masks the ugly truth behind the ceremony. Most entering Rykard's lair, willing or unwilling, probably didn't realize what they were walking into until it was too late. With each hero sacrificed to the king, the lava has likewise increased, now pouring out from the mountain, taking a huge swathe of the castle town with it. This has brought the townsfolk some distress, and the burning slugs some measure of glee, but none have been so overjoyed as the torturers. The lift bridge designed to survive the lava doubles as a new torture device. Hanging cages installed at the bottom lowered with the bridge to take a long dip in the magma. The WIRMS, who had taken to hiding in the wake of Godfrey's wars, similarly enjoy submerging themselves in that burning heat they live and breathe, one taking the clever position at the end of the magma flow. As for the WIRM lurking in its cave, no shortage of cages have been dangled down to feed prisoners to the beast, adding more bones to the magma shores. Tanith couldn't be more pleased with her husband's state, happy to sit in front of a looming portrait of him with the tiny hands of his victims reaching up, the same portrait used for the Tigger's cameo. This city of sin was exactly what the couple wanted, and it has earned them allies, chief among which is the Crucible Knight who shadows the consort as her bodyguard. He must agree with their notion of the god's hypocrisy, having lived through an era defined by pillage to form Marika's grand empire. Perhaps the knight simply misses those days of taking land through conquest for the Erdtree, but if nothing else, he is one holy hero who doesn't mind joining with traitors to see the gods robbed in honest manner. At one point in development, there were plans for this knight to be Ordovis specifically, highlighting the discontent with the post-Godfrey era. Fools burned by double standards see the champion swallowed by blasphemy as just desserts. Let the world return to that era of chaos and conflict, with red gold on the throne. What can those scholars at home really do? Stare into the peak. While MT Gelmir was becoming hell on earth, the troops caught the attention of an invading army. The local sword monument mentions an assault on Volcano Manor, and we can see numerous camps as well as soldiers.
Hey, and welcome to the chat. Side question, why is it From Software making shows and movies about almost all their IPs but Dark Souls, or why are they? I mean, we have Bloodborne, we have Elden Ring, we don't have Demon Souls or Shadow Tower or King's Field. Like, I think what we have to consider is that this is From Software breaching new territory. Miyazaki's talked a lot about him trying to diversify the company by making sure it's not just all resting on his shoulders. There are other perfectly solid, if not even better, directors who can handle games for him, so that way they can expand the amount of games they're working on as they grow as a company, which obviously going to have growing pains, and there's always going to be problems because that could change company culture. So obviously Miyazaki's trying to take that into consideration as he's trying to grow it as the president, while also wanting to be a director and developer who, you know, a storyteller. It's very clear Miyazaki's very passionate about game development and making his ideal games. And I think this multimedia push is part of that, where they've always had the comics and they've not really paid attention or whatever. But I think with Elden Ring, they're now trying to take advantage of that Game of Thrones audience type thing, where it's like, oh, well, you see, Martin's work's been adapted before, and look how big and popular that was, and what that did to the name recognition of Martin and his works overall. Maybe we can kind of leapfrog off that and try to help build up From Software's catalog of games. So I think they're looking at Elden Ring. I'm curious about the backstory to the Bloodborne project. I'm sure Jacksepticeye and others are going to have a lot to say about how this project came about and stuff. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the future. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sony was interested in expanding on the IP and stuff. They haven't made anything, they haven't done anything with obviously Bloodborne itself, but they saw the passion from like Jacksepticeye. They probably made a really good pitch, and probably from there they were kind of like, okay, let's see where this can go, because we also want to build upon that that audience. And I think From also saw that and was like, this is a good opportunity for us to try to, you know, maybe build up that IP, so we're not just relying on Elden Ring, we're also relying on that. And if both of these projects succeed at least well enough, I think they may be looking into doing stuff for some of their older games as well, potentially. So again, I feel like probably what the matter is that Elden Ring's the low-hanging fruit. It's very easy. It's easily their most popular IP right now, so they want to work on that one. Bloodborne's also obviously a beloved classic, but that one comes from the Sony side. It doesn't have to do with Namco Bandai or anything, so I think this is a completely separate track, and obviously it's probably their most popular Sony IP. And once both of those prove themselves, hypothetically, then I think they may look at stuff like, oh, hey, Namco Bandai, let's look at our Dark Souls. Hey, Sony, let's look at our Demon Souls. And they might do more with those games from there. Who knows, though? It could just be that maybe Miyazaki's just kind of done with Dark Souls now that they've had 3 games under their belt, and he's kind of like, I really don't want to return to that universe again for a while. Who knows? Could be.
From Leyndell on the Mount. Gideon likewise mentions the most horrific battle of the Shattering taking place there, which is consistent with the Sword Monument's description of events. This leaves no doubt that the battle for Volcano Manor was fought between invading Leyndell and Rykard's forces during the larger civil war. After the second defense of Leyndell, King Morgott identified a rival demigod to the west and organized an assault to remove him from the Highlands. But why? Unless Rykard had a direct role to play in the second defense, there was no reason to prioritize him over other demigods, who all stood by while the Omen fended off his attackers. Was it just because of Gelmir's proximity to Altus triggering the monarch's paranoia? No. In fact, Morgott had plenty of reason to believe that Rykard was an active threat demanding immediate attention. Consider the circumstances. The map for Gelmir notes in its description how the volcano's iconic sheer rocks and ominous clouds became all the more pronounced in the wake of the Shattering. The former is clear from the stone bridge crossing the seething river valley. The bridge isn't just broken, but misaligned along the 2 cliffs. The only reason for this level of geological shift in the rocks is the same reason the river is boiling hot, the lava. With the revival of the Great Serpent, the fire which once shaped Gelmir into the mountain it is today has also returned. Stone beneath the soil shifting as it is melted into magma. The extent of this renewed lava flow is manifest from the sulfur deposits stretching from the seething river all the way up its highest northern peak, not to mention the magma flooding the Gelmir hero's grave. The volcanic gases rising from the volcano similarly explain the even cloudier skies, smoke and sulfur alone sure to create a dark shadow hanging over Gelmir. While it may not be obvious to us in-game, anyone in surrounding Altus was sure to notice the changes. Morgott may not have been born until after the volcano went dormant, but he and others alive during that time wouldn't have difficulty deducing the cause. If the volcano was active again, that could only mean the return of the immortal snake, and if the snake had returned, then Rykard had either failed to handle the pagans or become a pagan himself. It wouldn't take much investigating to uncover the full truth either. We acquire roiling magma from the corpse at the Hermit's Shack, so at least one of the sorcerers staying at the nearby village took interest in Rykard's work. It was no great secret on Gelmir. More than likely, Morgott's scouts soon returned with rumors of the Praetor feeding himself to the serpent and reviving the pagan arts. That alone confirmed a devious betrayal, unforgivable blasphemy, as Gideon elucidates. For such sin, Rykard and his army were the biggest danger to the Erd Tree on the plateau, whether or not Morgott knew the faction's exact plans for it. That made stamping out this second rebellion the King of Leyndell's #1 priority. The movements of the Omen's army for this assault are simple to trace. The names of local grace points identify Gelmir's 1st and 9th campsites. These camps reference GUM, a Japanese system for mountain climbing mainly reserved for sites of religious significance. Typically, this system splits the ascent up the mount into 10 parts, with the trailhead as the first stop and the summit as the 10th stop. In our case, Grace identified the first and 9th stops along our pilgrimage to the Volcano Manor's entrance, the final destination, which appear to correspond to the number of campsites established along the trails. Put another way, we can trace the course of the assault from these beginning and end points. The fact that the first lies on the clifftop indicates that the army arrived from high up already, which is possible if traveling up the path through the seething river. This is consistent with the defenses set up around both Fort Lyad and the Hermit Village, anticipating an attack from particularly the river's direction. Details in the two areas also reinforce that conclusion. The garrison at Fort Lyad are Langdell's soldiers, whom the lord of the fort would welcome if they meant to overthrow Rykard, perhaps even negotiating his reinstallation as Volcano Manor's ruler once the Erdtree deposed the snake. The rest actually assaulting the manor definitely passed by the craftsman's shack afterward, just as the pulley crossbow can be looted from the inhabitant of that wrecked home. So too can the pulley bow be looted from the siege tower of the first camp beyond the village. The soldiers made one final stop at the hermit community before beginning their assault, picking up the fundamentalist artisan's inventions during the brief stay. Besides the bow, the genius may have also provided the jar cannon brought to the assault. Because the unusual invention relies on explosions to fire out of the conical pot, the rejuvenated volcano's eruption might well have informed the design. Hence the craftsman handing off just a prototype that no one ultimately had time to learn how to use. If the hermit's shack was studying lava for sorcery, why not the same for mechanisms? Taken all together, there is every reason to believe that Morgoth's army came up through the fort and village. While each is currently under attack from different enemies, the Abbatists were initially set up for the more foreseeable threat on Gelmir. The fort's garrison were perfectly capable of heading off any surprise counterattack from the rear, and the villagers existed as a final backstop in case something went disastrous. Meanwhile, the main army could remain focused on taking the castle manor, which might not have even noticed the troop movements up to this point. After establishing their first camp past the old hero's grave, Langdell's soldiers looked to have expanded down, setting up the wooden ladder connecting the camps at the top and foot of the cliffs. From the number of sites, Langdell fortified each position while slowly pushing forward, taking advantage of the fact that they had the manor boxed in. Facing little to no resistance, the army crossed the stone bridge and marched all the way up to the Road of Iniquity, practically at the manor's doorstep. All the while, the soldiers secured supply lines. The Bridge of Iniquity linking Altus and Gelmir over a small valley stands out as a rope bridge when there is the stone bridge further up the road. This smaller level of time and effort going into its construction precludes any place in some major civil project. When and why did it originate then? In all likelihood, the thing was built for this assault. We do come across numerous coffin carriages in the lead up to the Bridge of Iniquity, not to mention the one half buried with the forest-spanning Great Bridge further up the road. Why ferry coffins with bodies, and more importantly, their weapons across that bridge unless it was to join the others toward the bridge to Gelmir? They undoubtedly were delivered. On the Road of Iniquity, we can find a disguised mimic tear transform into one of the worm faces lurking in the Forest of Plenty. This implies that the army picked up an unsuspecting hitchhiker while passing through the area, which the coffin carriage and its complementary entourage facilitates. Altus was thus sending the Gelmir campaign their pick of armor and armaments from the dead. From where the bodies originated is easy enough to surmise. The only route to the Bridge of Iniquity that justifies cutting through the Forest of Plenty is the southern capital outskirts. Recall that Langdell's forces had all but finished the cleanup for that side of its second defense. What bodies weren't offered to the minor Erdtree Church have been stuffed into coffin carriages. And where did those carriages go? Perhaps onto the highway and out the southern gate, taking the byway across the forest-spanning Great Bridge and ultimately down and around to the Bridge of Iniquity. As they have slowly collected the war dead, the royal army repurposed them for their brethren's resupply, providing a steady stream of equipment up until the Great Bridge collapsed. The Bridge of Iniquity was therefore a way for the soldiers encamped to link up with these convoys and unload their cargo to swiftly bring to the front line. This was a massive siege, so the capital's living ramparts needed all the resources they could get to stand strong and outlast the enemy. How regrettable that it was not to be. Volcano Manor was certain to notice the army rapidly approaching, and their garrison reacted accordingly. At the turn off the Road of Iniquity, an invisible scarab rolls up a curious ash of war. Unlike Barrage, through and through makes a slow, penetrating shot rather than a continuous shot with rapid fire. The difference results in Barrage's ability to overwhelm a wide row of enemies while through and through excels in mowing down columns. Consider then the Gelmir Knights' position as Langdell's forces marched up the narrow cliffs where they would be waiting. It is obvious which tactics suited the environment. On the Road of Iniquity, the assault force had nowhere to run as the manor's great archers fired heavy shots straight through their ranks. Funneling themselves into a death trap, the army was sure to incur heavy casualties, and it wouldn't long before their commanders ordered a retreat. It was then that the defenders would launch a counterattack and try to force a rout, resulting in the deadly clashes while Morgoth's men were on the back foot. It was hard fought from both sides, but the results speak for themselves.
There we go. There we are. On the subject of them dipping their toes into cinema, do you think them doing 3 simultaneous projects, taking multiple different approaches, is mostly a way to gauge audience feedback on the medium? I think that's part of it. I think it's also just a matter of they feel they have to do this quickly, right? They can't afford to wait and see, like right now, they have a huge influx of cash because of Elden Ring, right? Like that has obviously made From Software a ton of money. So right now is the best time for them to invest when they have more money than they've ever had before, because they can't guarantee that they will be keeping that type of money inflow in the future. So now it's best that they try to use what they have to try to keep things going, you know, kind of cushion themselves while they kind of work on obviously building up their output, right? Which is part of the reason they're training a bunch of new directors and giving them more chances and doing all these smaller projects and things. At the same time that they're going to also do this cinema push and try to do as many of those as they feasibly can manage, right? So that way they can then test, okay, is this multimedia thing even going to work, right? Do people actually want to see an Elden Ring film? Do they want to see a Bloodborne animated movie or anything like that, right? Like, do they actually want us to do these games which have always been again, not to insult the games of the lore or anything like that, right? But these are been games that the vast majority of the audience engages as gameplay first, maybe atmosphere and presentation second, but story and narrative and things like that is always going to be not the forefront focus of these games, right? Like these aren't like, say, The Last of Us or something like that, right? Where everything is kind of built around trying to make those cinematic, story-driven experience right at the forefront more than it takes priority over everything else, right? In those games, with From Software, they're probably trying to gauge like if this was literally an Elden Ring without any gameplay, are people still interested? Do people still really want to see it? Same thing with Bloodborne. If you take out the gameplay, does this stand on its own, right? And I guess we'll see. We will see. Like to see which one resonates best with the fans. Yeah, exactly. I think this is also doing so where, let's say that Bloodborne turns out to be surprisingly really popular with people, but Elden Ring ends up falling flat on a dud. That's actually going to be useful to know because they'll have the understanding of being like, okay, maybe it's the animated medium. Maybe our fans who like our games are just generally more interested into animated stuff than live action, or maybe the way the live action was being done was inferior in a way, right? Like it just gives them a good comparison case, I think. And again, there's so many other factors, so it's not going to be something where like you can always make direct comparisons between the two because there are so many differences with how these projects are being approached and handled. But I do think that it's going to play a role. There's also maybe a case of, oh, Bloodborne isn't necessarily going to be canon per se. Maybe it's going to be very hands-off, but maybe Elden Ring, the IP, is going to be very hands-on. They're going to try to keep it as close to the canon as possible. Again, not saying that is how it's going to be, just kind of like going through like the possible scenarios here. Like they could be gauging all this type of stuff. Like what if we make it kind of like how we've handled the comics, where like the comics are basically just fans' interpretations, and they could be accurate, they could be inaccurate. We don't care. We don't reference them. We're not going to really pay that much attention. But then like say in this film here, in say the Elden Ring film, we're going to try to make it where it's like, no, this happened within the same canon that you played your game. You can play the game and you can imagine that these two take place in the same universe and world and story and all that stuff. Again, we will see how that works and plays out. If that's the case, if it's going to be kind of like, okay, we're kind of trying to keep this in the canon area, but we're not really trying to micromanage them to keep the lore consistent or something like that. We'll see. It's impossible to know until obviously everything pans out. In the end, we're just kind of, you guys are asking me questions so that way I can mind read what's going on in From Software's heads. And obviously, I am not a mind reader. I really hope their takeaways in that story needs to be more approachable too, because I love their medium for storytelling as is. I agree. Again, I think that From Software tells games that can only exist in the video game medium. Again, I have no problem with them doing multimedia stuff and making more discernible their content and narratives more approachable in that medium, because that's just kind of how you have to make it for that type of stuff. I wouldn't even be opposed if they want to literally do like a straight game adaptation that maybe would make some of the lore more spelled out or something like that. If they could like adapt it really well, it'd be actually an interesting thought exercise to be like, how do you adapt a game like Bloodborne and make it more easy for audiences to be able to follow on either in a cinematic basis or even like an episode by episode basis if it was like a TV show or something. Be an interesting thing to think about it. But anyway, that's beside the point. All right, let's kill Raleigh now. Let's kill Raleigh, get back to Raya. It is time, chat. It's time.
Encampment after encampment has been destroyed, with mountains of corpses strewn about the defoliated battlefield. As the Erdtree's banners fly in tatters, men and trolls alike have been strung up upside down in implicit mockery of their high and mighty honor. This setup stretches all the way across the stone bridge and past the corpse stench shack, the royal army logically pushed back to their 4 camps on the east end. There are some survivors, like the aforementioned Mimic Tyr, disguised as a rotten hollow newly escaped from one of the numerous pyres of bodies. A few exhausted troops similarly hide in the corner of the Road of Iniquity, trying to evade further notice as they barely survive. But with the stone bridge now fractured, these scant forces are trapped. Morgoth's forces faced a huge setback, and the enemy was still bearing down on them. All that fighting for every inch has amounted to nothing, though they didn't give up. With the conventional path no longer an option, the 4 camps hunkered down while the original camp atop the cliff redirected forces up the peak behind them. 8th and 9th camps were established at the top and bottom of these new cliffs, with far too many ladders in between. Just as we can, the invaders were obviously planning to cross the rope bridge after the 9th camp, climb over the falling star beast meteor site, and arrive at Volcano Manor from behind the enemy lines. It was a creative plan and another failure. Both camps lie in ruins, survivors in the 9th all afflicted with the frenzied flame, the cause plain from the hooded troll guarding the manor entrance with their same affliction. Even absent an army, the manor's residents have been able to fend off the assault, striking at the enemy camp before their plans could be realized. The troll alone has unleashed a plague through Lingdal's ranks, causing the battalion to fall apart. Once more, Lingdal was caught unawares and forced to fall back. From there, everything in the second prong of the invasion fell apart. Patrolling the manor's rear up to the stone bridge are marionettes, crafted by the new sorcerers that Rykard...
Yeah, again, I appreciate you guys, that you guys think my opinion is worth hearing and all that. It's just one of those things where it's like, I'm just, you know, like I said, we're going to get like interviews and stuff for like the BB film and stuff. And I'm sure we'll get the marketing for the Elden Ring film will ramp up as well, in the coming year. Who knows, maybe even this time next year specifically. But like, until then, it's all there. Like, it's a lot. There's only so much you can reasonably infer. Uh-oh, the dog needs me again. 1 second. All right, she's outside again. Okay. Goodness me. Anyway, as I was saying, I feel it's one of those things where we're going to be hearing a lot more. And until then, I don't know. I don't know if I'm accurate or inaccurate or whatever, but this is the best I can gather. And I'm not sure how that'll pan out.
I see.
Cool.
Now of the but it was all the time like the owl. If the when we are if you look.
All right.
If you
There we go. The red letter.
Forgive me. I know I saw something. If it took this, if you, if you.
Did I miss the one chance to see her as a snake? Damn, I don't think I'm ever gonna get her back then. Oh God, Doggo needs me again. 1 second. All right, there we go. Is there going to be an announcement at SawCon? No idea. I do not pay attention to that stuff.
if you she said that I should have. Well, let's think of what matters. Zarias has placed her trust that some things are better left unknown.
The serpent that it entered the room. Perhaps the man. If you discover.
I like how Hannah talks about lineage before we even actually confirm what she's so concerned about, you know? All right, there we go.
From there, everything in the second prong of the invasion fell apart. Patrolling the manor's rear up to the stone bridge are marionettes, crafted by the new sorcerers that Rykard was creating. They're the ones deployed to finish off the stragglers and fly Rykard's banner, as we see on the cliffs between the 8th and 9th camps. Some of the soldiers fled to nearby Volcano Cave, setting up an arsenal within the camp in preparation for the next stage of the assault. Unfortunately for them, they didn't seem to realize that these extensive and labyrinthine caverns were already the lair for demi-humans, the servants of Queen Margot eliminating the unsuspecting trespassers. As they now patrol outside their bone-laden den for more, the marionettes are already picking off the last scattered remnants one by one, flyers ready to rain lava from above with volcano pots. Despite their best efforts to hold the line, this venture was one more loss for Lingdal. The placement of the sword monument for this assault at the 9th camp couldn't be more appropriate. Apparent in all of this is just how long the whole affair has stretched out. Even after the shattering has formally ended, this horrific battle has continued. Most recently, Rykard's forces have broken through the 4 encampments and begun slaughtering the last of the soldiers up to the Bridge of Iniquity. The fact that we can acquire gold and vow not far into this battlefield highlights how prolonged fighting has made this battle, still on their own plateau, feel more like one of the old campaigns deep into foreign lands. Considering how new bushes and flowers grow on the remains of these sites, Gideon is right to recognize the battle as the most grueling. The first camp has withstood the enemy counterattacks, but with both prongs virtually wiped out, their situation is dire. The scavenger's curved sword found in the 8th camp reveals how human vultures have long since joined the dogs and crows in picking the dead clean, sawing apart bodies to collect the valuables. With that knowledge and no time to bury their comrades before the next battle, the starving soldiers have started eating their own. The irony of such cannibalism proves Rykard's point about the gods' hypocrisy. When push comes to shove, no one regulates themselves according to arbitrary virtue or vice. It is just as the sword monument says. There was no honor to be had by either side, both resorting to anything to avoid total defeat. It is an event filled with sacrilege, plague, and the corrupted hollows. The universal iniquity is why the grace points describe a sinner bridge and sinner send-off road across this whole battlefield. For the latter, the send-off appears to be for the overflowing corruption on that leg of the field, with rotten hollows falling into the seething river as we pass through the valley below. There are also a handful of hollow soldiers taking shelter in Seedwater Cave, posting a lookout and an imp statue seal at the entrance for fear of pursuit, maybe even from Lendl for their clear-cut desertion. For sure, morale is at an all-time low. And while this grueling battle was still ongoing, the larger war had ended and Rykard was stripped of his last blessing from the greater will. The half-eaten Great Rune's power was transferred to the divine tower of West Altus, all the way over in the capital outskirts. Like the tower on the east side of Lendl, Morgott has taken notice and thereby precautions against unwanted visitors. The only way to access the tower is through the sealed tunnel, so named because the entrance has been sealed away with an illusory wall. Hidden as it is, digging looks to have barely begun, though the noise from the miners' continued work defeats the purpose. Their yields must have been too critical to the war effort to abandon. Regardless, more than one wall hides the full extent of the complex, making it all the less likely for random explorers to find the tower at the other side. Admittedly, this may be more for worker safety. Stone diggers there are unique in throwing the poison stones used by their kind to exterminate pests, specifically harmful insects, the bugs in question assuredly referring to the lookout stone worms, infesting abandoned parts of the mines. In short, they already retreated to the front and hid when fumigation failed. Even if the sealing began with different intentions, the parts of the tunnel leading to the tower have nevertheless been abandoned, since overtaken by Erdtree roots. When Lendl demanded they hide the whole mine, there should have been no complaint. And with that, Morgott had secured 3 great rune blessings from the hands of those who might deign to rob them from a worthy successor. His efforts to eliminate one of those unworthy contenders have stalled, but shuffling men and equipment into the meat grinder has netted some benefits. For one, it nearly exhausted Gelmir's army, with no soldiers or knights of Rykard still standing on that battlefield, let alone the Volcano Manor. Finishing the job has fallen to constructs like the marionettes, while the living like that diseased troll are probably those recruited in the interim. Tanith has recruited a colorful cast of characters, mainly tarnished, after the shattering. If nothing else, Morgott has made Rykard's conquest of Lendl that much more difficult. The world's consumption has been delayed, though perhaps not for too long, as armies can always be replenished. How are they begot? After the serpent god finished devouring Rykard, it began giving birth not to snakes, but snake men. Perhaps it was because of the power of a demigod with a great rune, but the serpent's womb produced progeny with arms and legs very much like humans. A majority of snakes don't have a mammal's uterus, instead laying eggs, so the fact that the egg-laying mother suddenly has an amniotic sac within one speaks to the effect assimilating Rykard had on the reptile. The description of the serpent's amnion posits that this was all part of a ritual, so it may even be the sorcerer's conscious effort to produce progeny with his new family. Zariah's is one of the products of this ritual, at least, and she was told that her birth came with a great king's divine favor. If it was by the grace of God that she was born, then it may well be that all man-serpents were intended by their mother and father in one. That would explain why there would be some ceremony involved, unlike when the deity lays eggs. It also explains how Tanith came to adopt Zariah's as her child. Tanith proves quite the protective mother. Zariah's is ignorant of her brethren's existence, with Tanith alluding to childlike innocence. The girl doesn't even know about the dark side to Volcano Manor, hidden behind its walls. Because her true form as a snake earns her revulsion from the average person, she disguises herself as a human with magic when in public, albeit retaining her peculiar hunch from her serpentine body. However, this is because her true form was meant to be a secret shared between mother and daughter alone. In other words, the young Zariah's was raised by Tanith to think of her form as unsightly to others, the girl herself apologetic about the deception. We only discover the truth because she forgets how she changed back while in the privacy of her chambers. The snake isn't even necessarily aware that she is adopted, taking pride in being born to her mother and a king's blessing. All this demands that Tanith raise the girl close to birth in almost total isolation within the manor. So coddled is she. The girl's handwriting is amateur despite her aristocratic upbringing. Most important is how Zariah's adopts the name Rhea in human form, another secret between parent and child. Why is this? Tanith could have chosen any name for the daughter she raised, so why keep that one if she wanted something new for the girl's public persona? And if Rhea's true name was so important, why bother changing it at all? The name Zariah's is shared with the main character of Night Master, a novel written by one Tanith Lee. But aside from a humorous reference, there is nothing especially notable about the name. Even assuming that it is peculiar to outsiders, no one would suspect Rhea's humanity because she introduced herself as Zariah's. The only explanation is that there is something deeply personal about that name in direct connection to Rhea's snake form. The daughter does take pride in her form because of Tanith, who is joyful that she received the grace of the Serpent King. In that case, the name Zariah's probably came not from her, but from Rykard. If so, everything falls into place. Zariah's is most likely one of the first, if not the first, spawn of Rykard and the Great Snake. Because Tanith chose to dedicate herself to her husband's cause, the king rewarded her with a child he could never provide her before. Zariah's was thus proof of their love, and that the
was that did they actually say spawn or was that something else? Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, yeah, okay.
Consort remained in the demigod's good graces. If so, most important is how Zariah's adopts. Meanwhile, the other snake men were born without receiving that same coddling. The serpent's amnion. Meanwhile, the other snake men were born without receiving that same coddling. Meanwhile, the other snake. If most important is how Zariah's. Meanwhile, the other snake men were born without receiving that same coddling. The serpent's amnion left on the.
No, okay. Back to you.
If so, everything falls into place. Zariah's is most likely one of the first, if not the first, spawn of Rykard and the Great Snake.
There we go.
Because Tanith chose to dedicate herself to her husband's cause, the king rewarded her with a child he could never provide her before. Zariah's was thus proof of their love, and that the consort remained in the demigod's good graces. Tanith herself implies that she was skeptical about being a mother, but she persisted with raising Zariah's and clearly has come to love her like her own child. It was for that reason she has shielded her from all the ugliness of their rebellion against the Erdtree, including the circumstances of her birth. It is for that reason that Rhea keeps a necklace with her mother's cameo, desperate to retrieve it after Boggett robs her. It was for that reason that Tanith, wanting to maintain her dignified manner, chooses to be alone to mourn after hearing of her child's death. At every step, the woman had deceived Zariah's out of of her love for her. And because her name and reviled form go hand in hand from birth, she wishes it kept separate from the girl's human face. Meanwhile, the other snake men were born without receiving that same coddling. The serpent's amnion left on the Temple of Igla's altar, the god's skin draped above it. Close inspection of this giant snake skin confirms a hole where Rykard's face should be, so it and the amnion both were likely collected as the growing snake reached that size. The reason may be inferred from the item's menu graphic, which features a new snake man burgeoning within. Given the nature of the immortal serpent, the amniotic sac might repair itself after every birth. This would explain why Rhea finds it scent nostalgic, instantly recognizing the item as part of her birth mother, and where she came to be, it is the very sac which once enwrapped her. That being the case, it is reasonable to tear the amnion out of the snake, allowing it to serve as a vessel for more fetuses while the deity focuses on eating and growing. Offering it upon the altar shows the pagan's reverence for this offspring, continuing the rituals on Rykard's behalf as the amnion's vitality spontaneously generates more children. These spawn of the devil are just as you would expect of serpents. Despite relatively humanoid proportions, they can stretch their necks and torsos to absurd lengths, more comparable to a snake. Zarias additionally displays a superb sense of smell, even sensing people's nuanced emotions in cut dialogue. Add in spitting venom from their fangs, and they would be deadly predators even without the intelligence to employ weaponry. However, their human levels of intellect make them that much more dangerous if also cultured. At the same time, the race does possess at least one trait unlike either snake or man. After all, the description to Gelmir's Fury notes that thinking to control a volcano is the arrogance of both men and snakes, and that isn't just referring to the god at the source of the magma. Indeed, whereas Zarias finds the foggy lake of Liurnia too chilly, snake men feel perfectly at home in lava environments, several basking in the flowing magma. With that lava, they create blades and whip candlesticks. We do see humans forge similar weapons out of the uncooling molten rock, like the smoldering shield. However, only the serpents reveal the sophistication to forge weapons without solidifying the lava, allowing the wielder to splatter some of that melting heat upon the surroundings while swinging it around. The whip especially creates a sea of magma like what surges out the mountain. This use case is temporary, as seen with the various man-serpents carrying hardened arms. Still, it is obvious that the race possesses an intuitive mastery of lava as children of the Great Serpent. Another armament they adopt is a domed shield the color of specifically red copper. Shikudu typically refers to a gold-copper alloy creating a brown or tan color, though in this case, it seems to be just the standard metal forged in red-hot magma. With fire and rock, they are simply unmatched. This fixation on the lava is a matter of faith for them, the weapon holders demonstrating the same reverence for their parents' gift as the pagans. The magma candlestick is even considered a magic tool with how the wielder turns the lava shaped as the candle flame into long and flexile whips. The king among their kind has gone so far as to fashion a staff with red glintstone to empower the heat born of sacrifice. And as the gem-studded golden hilts insinuate, this was all to emulate their extravagant serpent king. Such magic comes with an implicit association with the pagan religion, though the sorcerer king has yet to learn beyond the basics, like swift glintstone shard or glintstone comet hard. The one snake man with an unhardened candlestick is also alone in wearing silver and onyx jewelry with a prominent venom sac, as if even the poison holds ceremonial purpose, specifically.
Did I really write that right? Okay, there's Shakudo. No, it's Comet. I heard Comet Tard. I was like, oh my fucking god. Did I really make that? I know I'm a tard, but come on. No, I did not. I'm not that retarded.
Primitive witch doctor. The race's preference for curvy, undulating, or forked weaponry shows pride in their serpentine heritage, and doubtless they recognize this relation as divine. That respect for the Elder Serpent is why they remain in Volcano Manor serving the deity's interests. They seem to regularly report to Tanith, since Zarias spies a slithering shadow resembling her slip out one of the guest rooms via a secret passage to the town church behind an illusory wall. In all likelihood, these rendezvous occur in the dead of night precisely because Tanith doesn't want her daughter and them to be crossing paths, the guest wing both less frequented and convenient for abducting visitors if needed. Why abduction? For new prisoners to torture, of course. The serpents patrol the castle town as additional wardens, their extendable bodies useful for higher vantage whilst on lookout. From the main Inquisition chambers on high, they bestow their sacred venom to the pagans to throw in pots. The nobles tortured in the depths of the manor likewise have their heads leaking this venom, bursting upon death. All around these aristocrats slither the snake men, happy to take the roles of inquisitors. In absence of the army, they secure the area, which has turned out to be a long-term arrangement. To the gut and gutted. Despite all this fire and fury, Volcano Manor soon lost momentum. Item descriptions and dialogue reiterate how Rykard's ambitions fell to base greed. For the first half of our boss battle, we aren't even fighting Rykard, but the actual snake, the demigod lying dormant. It is only when the reptile lies limp that the man finally awakens and decides to contribute for his grand aspirations. The demigod, for all his ambition, eventually succumbs to the appetite of a deity, subsumed as gorges on flesh of his fellow man. This doesn't come as much surprise, considering Rykard's underlying motivations. Already, the Shardbearer has what he always wanted, union with his beloved mother. With that accomplished, it is easy for him to become lost in the reverie. There he constantly sits in scaly embrace, robbing power from whatever prey is sent his way. Offered to him on a silver platter, his growing family allows the demigod prince to play king without needing to actively work toward their larger goals. All those meals surely make him feel worthy of his title and marriage to the snake, but it is hardly aspiring. The fact that one of the children is contesting Rykard's throne stresses how the Serpent King has created a vacuum in his absence. He may hang a caduceus banner behind his empty seat, but no one is actually ruling Gelmir in the current chaos, a fanatical cult of men, and snakes just funnels bodies. Even that coalition is cracking. The Sorcerer King's heir has a few kindred as guards, plus a handful of nobles as vassals. As they can only stand in awe or cower, they offer the corpse of a traitor to his majesty, his crime apparent from the man-serpent ashes he carries. Facing resistance, the snake men seek strong leadership, which their mother and father-in one refuse to provide. Rykard might argue that he yet needs more power or need not be so proactive, but meanwhile, his kingdom is falling apart. The usurper seems to have learned his sorcery from the Carrion servants, Albinoric and man-serpent side by side, behind the statue seal access from the throne room. In short, the king is protecting old enemies in a new coalition forming. If not for the innate faith in the great snake, this coup might have begun much sooner. Not all would remain so loyal. Contrast to the other knights to Shardbearers, the armor description for Gelmir knights emphasizes how they once served Rykard. As the Knight Spirit in Volcano Manor explains, this was because Rykard's blasphemy no longer held regal aspirations. In becoming nothing more than a gluttonous snake, the knights began thinking of him as a monster that needed to be slain, their lord already gone. That idea seems to have sprouted from the assault on Volcano Manor. The spirit of a noble is among the corpse pile on the road of iniquity, rejecting his master's blasphemy at this battlefield is what it would rot, something that allegedly anyone would agree with. Since a grinding battle was all but guaranteed in this existential vie for the world order, we can assume that the issue isn't the ugly nature of war but the aftercare. Those who proudly raised Rykard's crest were left to rot in the field, even as the enemy was being strung up. Without showing the minimal respect, was that how the Supreme King treated his loyal vassals? The truth was that Gelmir's knights were never blindly dedicated to the cause of blasphemy. From the start, Rykard envisioned himself as a regal inquisitor, and that ambition for the king's seat inspired his knights to wear the abstract but ornate crest. It was that same arrogance they continued to follow as it morphed into blasphemy. But now, where were those arrogant ambitions headed? Rykard's blasphemy wasn't so much about overturning the old order for a brand new one as it was satiating his greed. The knights were fighting and dying for an apathetic lord who would doom them to become the most horrifying kind of hollow in his endless struggle against divinity. For the surviving knights, Rykard's libertine ideals looked like a total farce. The one with royal knights' resolve lays beneath his lord's portrait, in a room with a chair facing an even larger portrait. His obsessive example shows how their king was privately missed, and no amount of determination would bring him back. And if the king they served is dead, the least they could do was restore his honor slaying the beast which consumed him. To that end, these dissidents found the Serpent Hunter and probably confronted the Great Serpent with it, hence the corpse offering the weapon in the boss room. The fact that the Night Spirit knows of the Tarnished and our mission indicates that this overthrow took a fair bit of time, well after the shattering. Whether that was due to the difficulty in finding this ancient relic, their ultimate tragic fate is obvious. But the base reptile paid no mind to the tool which could be used to destroy him, and that presented an opportunity. The dead, in flesh or in spirit, have laid out the path to hunting the snake practically on our lap. The Night Spirit especially is convinced of our mission to slay demigods, finally resting in peace once the deed is done, the gesture he leaves showing his eternal gratitude. With Rykard's demise, we salvage what is left of their lord's honor, as well as honored their sacrifice. The sins cannot be undone, but justice may still be served. Until then, Tanith will continue to feed her husband new heroes, directing the Inquisitors and Manserpents from the castle on his behalf. The army has already played its role, seeing Volcano Manor through the shattering. The rest of the fighting can be handled by puppets, or the occasional renegade who seeks shelter from the manor. So long as there are blasphemers with nowhere else to go, the castle crowning Gelmir should stand strong. This includes outsiders, like the frenzied troll who undoubtedly climbed the mountain on word that the ominous peak became a haven for the Erdtree's enemies. With no hope for a cure to his ailment, that hooded giant knows the Golden Order's rejection, combined with anguish which begs this world's end. It is no wonder if he found kindred spirits in those who proudly rebel instead of hide away. While not everyone might benefit from mastering the power of flame or seeing Armageddon, Rykard's message still resonates, and that is his house's greatest asset going forward. A villain makes the hero. Tanith calls rebellion against the Erdtree the dearest wish of Volcano Manor, but with many in their own ranks becoming disillusioned with the proposition of a united front, she has to look for new sources of heat. Initially, this was accomplished through abductor virgins. These obvious reference to the Iron Maiden, unsurprisingly, were originally another of the Inquisitor's torture devices. Many come equipped with the saw blade Giza invented, others using the sickle and chain or a combination of the two. The needless suffering of such weaponry has come to symbolize the enemy, which rolls through the castle town contributing to the madness. One even joins ex-prisoners on break from lookout, behind an imp statue sealed to a watchtower. An Inquisitor with their Girandol similarly took two virgins to set up a private torture chamber in a small cave in the depths of the volcano, perhaps hoping to escape the lava already flooding the area, evidently. The person ultimately joined the bones of his victims in that old animal den. Still, they have clearly been a favorite tool of the sadist's repertoire. This Gelmir origin perplexes some fans, due to the appearance of two more Iron Virgins at the Fort of Reprimand. The iconic saw blade is supposed to be Giza's invention, only later used for the Virgins. Haven has either appeared in the realm of shadow. More than likely, these specific overall are intended to be the Fort's independent invention. The themes of torture and snakes do comport well with the Fort and Mesmer. Even the image of a mother holding a baby can be linked to the statue of Marika behind the Impaler's throne. Altogether, it's easy to imagine the Crusaders inventing something like the Iron Virgin. Combined with the two's location outside the castle, tucked to the side, and they are liable to be the Fort's means of capturing deserters out in the field, beginning the torment as the devices bring the insubordinates back for punishment. It would explain the damage to one, struggling to arrest veteran soldiers. Put simply, the developers are probably just reusing the enemy for the separate narrative in DLC, similar to the Omen Killers, leading the so-called reprimanding. It is this function as mobile prison transports that caught Tanith's attention. Although we do see a number of iron puppets finishing off Morgoth's remnants on the front lines alongside the wood marionettes, plus one behind the lines, caught up in the unrelated raid of the Hermit Village. The majority have traveled across the lands between on another task. A magic device was installed in these dolls, allowing them to warp their content straight to Volcano Manor, as we can confirm personally. This warp device also enabled the dolls to teleport back as well, based on the number surrounding us at the destination. This was the perfect way to circumvent the battlefield on Gelmir, and teleportation might even explain how they reached some of their locations. Indeed, it is one thing to encounter an Iron Virgin at the foot of Raya Lucaria, another to find more in the isolated academy. We can encounter them atop the ramparts of Curia Manor, in the heart of Redmane Castle, even humorously enough, inside the sealed tunnel. One way or another, they get around, and for one obvious purpose, to collect prospective heroes. The abductor's targets become all the clearer from where the enemy tends to congregate. Beyond Gelmir, a notable number have come to Lindell's fortified manor, where tarnished heroes most recently have gathered. The same can be said for Raya Lucaria, where Rennala and her heroic knights might be found. The largest concentration is reserved for Caelid, where Radon's forces are currently heroically resisting the Scarlet Rot. Besides the one in Redmane Castle, another virgin has been battling the giant dogs across the valley from the abandoned cave. Exploring said cave, countless more dolls have sunk in the rot swamp gushing up into the cavern. With them lies a corpse carrying the serpent bow, the complementary serpent arrows sold by the nomadic merchant further north. In other words, formless serpents joined in the region, presumably out of interest in their fellow assassins in Celia. Combining the information, a large convoy came down from Gelmir, only to flee into the cave to escape the local fauna and become trapped with rot when the natural bridge across the valley serendipitously collapsed. Although this does show the attention Volcano Manor has paid to the land's affairs, it is equally telling that the expedition failed so disastrously. Truth be told, the Iron Virgins have proven poor abductors. The warp device takes us beneath the lift bridge in the manor town, right where the volcanic lava is currently pouring into. The emergent magma rivers, naturally, wreck every returning virgin, leaving only dead men and snakes for bats to scavenge. Worse, Patches implies that the device is broken in all but one of the dolls. Perhaps it wasn't designed to withstand the rugged journeys these virgins make. Regardless, this effectively strands the rest in their corner of the world, even if they do continue operating. As a result, every abductor virgin we encounter rewards broken runes, all that is left after the Serpentine pilots gobble up their captives. The faces twisted with anguish manifesting on the wreckage betrays the number of souls trapped inside those iron coffins over time. As the wrecks among the corpse piles around town suggest, painful deaths are their forte, not preparing Rykard's meals. And so, in that long time since, Tanith has shifted to inviting the Tarnished proliferating across the lands between to her household. Having learned their mission entails becoming hero kings, the consort exploits any suspicion of the Two Fingers to recruit recusants, pitting such Tarnished against their predecessors. By overcoming the old hands who already cultivated the strength of champions, the traders hone their skills, and Volcano Manor rids itself of potential Elden Lords. Best remove any obstructors for when the Serpent King does finally set out to burn the Erdtree. Once she deems them of heroic level, Tanith has given those Tarnished an audience with Rykard, where they have all met their demise. This has only served to provide Volcano Manor with furled fingers to present future recusants, ours left on the guest table with a letter for our first assignment. With the added benefits of invading as a spirit, blasphemy has become a major threat to the aging Tarnished, regardless of actual allegiance to the Erdtree. Because of this purpose, the manor has been selective with which Tarnished join, though Tanith is perfectly willing to accept the rare, uninvited guest. Even then, our stay in the guest rooms is provisional until we prove our mettle with our first assignment. As the consort attests, their rebellion has no place for the weak-willed. Every recusant must dirty his or her hands with the blood of brethren. In her view, the dirtier we become, the further we proceed along the path of heroism. Anything else, and she politely asks that we leave. After we assassinate a few targets, she trusts us enough to share details about Rykard, spinning a yarn about his principled stance against the gods. She draws a fair comparison between Tarnished and the demigods, competing for the power of runes at the imposition of this divine system with its relatively meager blessings. However, she only offers a more direct contest for power between Tarnished while obscuring the reality of our chance encounter with Rykard on that path, never clarifying what it means to walk with him as family. In short, it is a farce for the amoral or desperate. Tanith assigns Zarias to head out and personally hand invitation letters to the prospective recusants, perhaps an excuse for the girl to see the world beyond their tiny manor interior. Like her mother before her, Rhea began traveling around as a human ambassador, inviting any seemingly worthwhile Tarnished she came across. Her innocence makes her an easy mark, which Boggett capitalized upon. Rhea claims that she was attacked, but the blackguard blames her for getting tricked, intimating that the strange girl was taken in by the Tarnished act to approach her before getting robbed blind. As the ruffian points out, she should be grateful her naivete doesn't have her face down in a ditch, though she protects herself well enough with a golden magic barrier from our first meeting, at least. Regardless, Rhea has been nowhere near as discerning with the Tarnished she invites, considering she looks for the kind willing to kill brethren. Still, the girl is persistent. Deprived of her precious necklace, she pursued Boggett back to his hideaway in Liurnia Lake, though at a loss at what to do next. That is when we can come across the girl under the folly, prompting her request to retrieve it for her. Beyond her gratitude, she uses this incident as a test to see if we have the strength of body and heart to challenge our fellow Tarnished, formally introducing herself and her organization once we pass. Her invitation comes with another test to reach Altus Plateau, though she will offer advice on the path through the ruin-strewn precipice in lieu of the grand lift of Dectus ceasing function. After succeeding at this, she will already be waiting for us at the Lux ruins, ready to teleport us straight to Volcano Manor with the touch of our hands. Tanith performs a similar art taking us to an audience with Rykard, so she likely taught her daughter, if only to spare her witnessing the horrific battle on the mount. The Tarnished don't need to risk their lives crossing it either. For her part, Zarias is just happy to have more people at her mother's side, oblivious to where this collaboration will end up. Even when we discover her true form, the representative is quick to clarify that her mother isn't deceiving us likewise. However, we can bring this all crashing down. Up until this point, Zarias has had a skewed perspective of her entire circumstance, unaware of what happens to the heroes she brings to the manor. Her whole life, she has never questioned the woman she called mother. Both as a snake and human, she wears the green robes of a noble's child. Even for her disguise, Rhea modeled her appearance on her supposed mother and father. While she still lacks eyebrows to her eerily wide-set eyes, the snake does have blonde hair like Rykard, worn in the same style as Tanith. Everything Zarias has been told led her to believe that she was a special child to a king and consort, misunderstood for her blessed form. The only change for Rhea is that she started referring to her mother as Lady Tanith to hide their familial connection. Never once did she doubt her self-worth or blood relation, showered with a mother's kindness all her life. But maturing and seeing the world, there was sure to be a nagging itch in the back of her mind, which recent events have begun to scratch. Her first inkling was when she began hearing the sound of breathing and scales scraping behind the walls of the guest chambers. The exhausted messenger convinces herself that it is just a hallucination, but we can confirm an infestation of snake snails slither on the stone floors, walls, and ceilings. That by itself should draw no concern, but Snake Woman must have begun wondering if she was truly alone in this world, or if the manor hid more secrets. Her suspicions flare up again when she witnesses another of her kind one night, lost in thought after it disappeared into one of the guest rooms. We can infer that the man-serpents regularly report to Tanith in the dark of night precisely to avoid crossing paths with Zarias, using illusory walls to hide the secret passages in the guest rooms. Hesitant to doubt her mother, the indecisive girl tasks us with investigating on her behalf, and reporting back the reality comes as a shock to her faith in Tanith. Showing her the serpent's amnion finally gives Zarias the resolve to find answers, hoping that this will let her earnestly call Tanith mother again. Following her investigation, Zarias learned about the horrific ritual she was spawned from, lacking anything sacred in her eyes. As a bastardization of both men and snakes, she considers her existence unforgivable to both, definitely not something Tanith should have been raising as her own child. As a result, the girl succumbed to despair. When we next meet Rhea, she is kneeling amongst the bones of her brethren's past victims, awaiting death at their hands as cut dialogue clarifies. She has even picked up Datekar's woe, all but guaranteeing the damage inflicted on her will be fatal. But having waited far too long in her estimation, she asks us to give her the death she desires. Should we deny her, she soon after leaves on another journey, taking our supposed kindness yet strictness as a chance to succeed her mother someday as a temper of heroes. Clearly, she feels the need to further broaden her horizons and find more candidates, inspired by our example. But from her letter, she still doesn't understand the full implications of her mother's work despite everything she already hid. On Tanith's end, she hopes Zarias would abandon these questions, worried when she sees her not around without any new duties. Already assuming the worst, Tanith requests that we have her daughter drink the tonic of forgetfulness she kept to free her from the devastation. The consort realizes the hypocrisy of her actions. There she was, talking up the majesty to their rebellion against the Erdtree, only to make a mockery of Rhea's own dignity no different from said tree. Yet at the same time, Tanith can't stop selfishly wishing for the girl to live in blissful ignorance, preferring to deny the snake's agency if it saves her from death. She looks down on her child as too weak to handle the truth and bemoans how that makes her a terrible mother. It is at that moment that Tanith realizes the true meaning of Rykard giving her that drug. He also saw her as weak, and he was right. Rhea might see the gift as a kindness, but Tanith knows that she should be resented for never letting her little girl leave the nest. Left alone, Rhea eventually disproves her weakness. Tanith cannot. She is forever a slave to her bleeding heart. This grand revelation casts a long shadow. Despite her dignified front, Tanith has never actually been untouchable. Acting above it all compensated for her glaring vulnerability all her life. Her weakness was why the dancer became an itinerant, why the itinerant became a prince's wife, and why the prince's wife became a recusant. It is because she always bent to the world bearing down on her that she saw Rykard's will to resist that world with new strength so beautiful. Whereas her love for Zarias was built on pity for her perceived same weakness, her love for Rykard was premised on the dream to escape her weakness. For that reason, she finds us just as beautiful in attaining heroic strength treading the sullied road, though her king will always be the ultimate fantasy for her. Even in his dying throes, the demigod laughs, insisting that he cannot be subject to anyone's order, being an indestructible snake. His passion lights a flame which can burn down the world, while hers burns no one. But when captivated by flame, one must be wary not to be drawn too close, lest you fall and it immolate body and soul. When we return from our audience contrary to Tanith's plan, she is surprised, but quick to accept our victory, appreciating the confirmation of Rykard's own weakness at the present time. Confident that her husband will return stronger than ever, she soon departs for his corpse and begins feasting upon his massive head, hoping to assimilate him and the snake both into her body and become the new deity. Still fleeing her own weakness, the metaphorical devouring mother sees her only hope in becoming a literal one, living up to her name shared with the Phoenician goddess meaning serpent lady in the process. To her dying breath, she is consumed with Rykard, dreaming of when they devour the gods together as family. Attempting to subvert the snake's revival for power is certainly opportunistic, but for Tanith, this selfish pursuit may be her way of showing love and belonging. All that aside, adopting Rykard's strength of will and subsequent strength of body is the consort's true passion now, hence her indifference to seeing the castanets from her dancer days. Patches might be enamored with Tanith's stuck-up attitude, but the woman in question no longer cares for her dignified mask. All she was has been stripped bare to make room for base craving, a fitting end for the royal couple's blasphemous ambitions as the thief admits. Whether we leave Rhea alive, kill her, or erase her memories, Tanith's fate remains unchanged. No matter her affection for Zarias, she feels compelled to stay the course, only regretting that she fooled an innocent girl to suit her maternal conceit. Even as all the recusants leave, seeing their leader lose herself, Rhea will remain after drinking the tonic. While lonely, the snake decides to wait for her mother's return, prioritizing Tanith's peace of mind as always. Degeneracy invariably erodes high-minded ideals, blinding men to the loyalty of virtue. Contrary to justice, Rykard leaves a foul legacy of broken mothers, efforts to help wasted in pursuit of ego.
And there we go. There we go. Yep. I think it's even better now, chat. All those little edits and tweaks and things, I think they did it a lot of good. I think it's better, more factually accurate. I think it flows a lot better. I'm very happy with this. There we go.
If you followed it, thank you. I will never be a good mother. Our Lord must have. My meekness is all too clear. Sweet Zarias. Have I earned your scorn? Sweet Zarias.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's it for this. I guess I did. I missed it, chat. I missed the one chance I could get her back. I completely I blanked out. Oh, well. Let's get back here. You must escape Volcano Manor. The circumstances are dire, Raya. I'm not sure what you're referencing there, Nick. It's either something I haven't seen or my memory is just that shit, which it's probably the latter. There we go. Wow. Yeah, wow, Xavier. Wow.
You, it's defeat until I will leave. I will the champion. This.
There we go. All right, let's see. Where are you, girl? There we go. There we are. Keep in mind, this is like the snake's throat or something where Rykard's head is, so just thought that'd be worth pointing out. It's a poop joke, is that so? I do not see the connection, sorry to say. Gotta put that one down the toilet, Nick. I'm sorry to tell you. All right. I know Xavier will appreciate me doing this for him. Oh, I like how you can see the hand sticking out there. That's cool. Like, that's not supposed to be there.
Oh, you. Allow me some time. Our lords come. Dear Rykard, I will one day. Dear Rykard, I will one day.
Can't even bother to look at me.
I wish one day. Dear, I wish to be one day.
Yeah, no. No luck, chat. Also, I just know she's eating that thing through her mask. I don't know. I feel like this would be a good time. I get it because Tannis' mask is so iconic and stuff to her, and it kind of really seals that kind of like heartless kind of atmosphere she gives off, like, right? Like, it really captures that air of this dignified woman who's got no emotion or anything, as she says all this cold-hearted shit. But like, I don't know, I feel like this might have been a good time to actually show how, like, she's the person on the necklace and she has the same thing as Raya with the hair and all that. Now you notice that? Yes, only now do I notice that. I'm sure I'm late to the party. There we go. The mask stays on during Vor. Yeah, this does technically count as Vor, doesn't it?
Dear Rykard, I wonder.
Miyazaki's really bringing out all the fetishes for this one, huh? We got NTR, we got Vor, we've got we got what's it called? I don't know. Does it count as self-cest? Because technically Rykard is fucking himself, right? In order to produce the Snake Men, right? So does that count as self-cest? Or is it more like incest because they're all family, quote unquote? Maybe both? That makes it better. Incest and self-cest. You get the combo pack.
Dear, I wonder.
Yeah, nothing else I think we can really highlight here. There we go. Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do to get creative angles on this one. I guess. Now these are the important questions. All right, where are we going here?
Dear, I won.
Okay. So like I said, I feel like in terms of what we've got here, it seems like I've got pretty much all the facts in order. The only thing I want to change still is the stuff on the nudity. Like I said, I think it's just a simple matter of heat now. As much as I would love to tie that into the abuse that the pagans and stuff suffered and everything, I think that's probably the more likely intention from the devs. So I'm gonna have to try to, you know, cut that stuff out where I bring it up in connection to potentially that, and kind of find a different way to work that in. Otherwise, I'll look into that interview question from Miyazaki, see if there's anything specific about Rykard he says that's worth mentioning. But outside of that, I feel like we've exhausted the topic pretty much in its entirety. Like, we already have a lot of the stuff talked about in Gelmir, obviously, in relation to the snake and the general background of the place. Godhunt's covers a bit more, and then all the stuff directly pertinent to Rykard and his faction have pretty much been established, right? Like, we talked about the kind of the hilarious coup by one of the snake men. Like, I'm almost tempted to kind of like point out the irony of like the whole you know, Rykard's got all these daddy issues and then ends up, you know, styling himself a king and all that shit and being like, no, I'm the true king and all that stuff. Like, I'm more worthy of mommy than you. And now you have a snake man who's doing the exact same thing with Rykard and the Great Snake. So there's very much that kind of like, you know, dramatic irony there. But I don't think that's something needed to highlight. It's more we could talk about themes, I guess. I think I've talked enough about themes as they're pertinent to Rykard's character. Even with magic, how the fuck did they hang those chandeliers? Listen, you can say that about a lot of things in these games. Like, how the fuck did they build that? At some point, you just accept it's all about hype and aura. All about hype and aura. Okay, oh, we have the bodies here. We have the snake stuff here. We have Raya and Tanith has been covered. All the different areas. Bogart is covered. We've covered all the stuff with the knights. We've covered the. I can't believe I thought I had an entire paragraph written for this guy, but no, I didn't have anything written for that Royal Knights Resolve guy. But now that's included, so that's there. We have the stuff on the Albinorics, the Omen Killers, the Abductor Virgins, the DLC, the ones across the various areas. Oh, you know what? Maybe I can mention for the Recusants the night thing, because I saw how we were getting the lava sorcery, so you can make an argument that I can either mention that in relation to the knights learning sorcery, or in relation to the Recusants, kind of point out how they're the new knights. It is an audience chamber after all. Yeah, as an audience, you know, if you're having an audience with the king, you need to make sure that it's fancy, right? Granted, they should have given him a better throne. I think they could have taken all these scorched little flakes, you know, flakes, and kind of piled them together into a giant ashen throne, you know? A wonderful throne, a chair of soot for the king, you know? Really make it feel like you're really visiting his royal majesty. Yeah, so we got that. I added the guest hall stuff to God Hunts. Because I thought I had already included that here. I guess what I thought was probably, oh, I might mention it in Rykard, so I'll just omit it for now. That was probably what my original thinking was when I was writing both Farm Colonist, Gelmir, and God Hunts. But I ultimately didn't mention it in any of those, so I've decided to include it now in God Hunts. That's where I think it's most relevant. It's important to kind of highlight this idea. You know, it's directly pertinent to the idea of Mesmer staying at Volcano, and Melina too, staying at Volcano Manor for a time. So I think including it there was perfect. This is what Trump's ballroom is gonna look. You know, they say it couldn't be done, but I was the first to be able to build an entire ballroom inside of a volcano. You know, I found the bestest volcano. It is the #1 volcano. Everybody tells me this. They say, Trump, no one could have built a ballroom inside a volcano quite like yourself. And they were right. They were very much right, but it was very kind of them to say that. Very humble. No, but I think maybe I can include mention of the church. Maybe I could include reference to the church there. Yeah, you know what I can mention? I can mention that the church in town remains small. How the church in town remains relatively small compared to the old Temple of Aegle. Yeah, it could be something like that. So let's see, the nudity, mention the church, mention the whole lava sorcery thing to quote-unquote knights regarding us as recusants. Guest hall is not really needs to be covered. We have the Albinorix covered. We have Omen Killers covered. The prisons and the cells and everything. And then the snake... Snake Men covered, Snake King covered, dark rooms that the Albinorix are in, including the Watchtower and the one in the Manor, Albinorix in the recessed area, the deep dank Inquisition Chamber. With the Abductor Virgins, that's covered. We make passing reference to the burning slugs and the bats, but we don't really need anything for them. Plus, they have their own stuff in fire monks and man bats, respectively. So I think we should be good there. Oh, another animal carcass. Okay. These things are just everywhere, huh? Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah. Then, of course, we have that. There we go. All right. All right, here we go. All right, I think that's good. Just want to make sure I include the animals and stuff here. So, you know, it's a cave, probably was an animal den. Then Inquisitor was probably trying to escape the lava, comes down here with the abductor virgins to create his own little private Inquisition chamber. I don't think it ended well for him or his victims. You know? I don't think it did. All right. All right. And with that, I feel like we're probably done, chat. Like, I think we've covered pretty much everything we wanted. Yeah, Tanith is covered. Everything regarding her and the dancer, the Rana stuff is covered. Realm of Shadow, I already said covered. Yeah, okay. I think we end this here then. This will probably be, again, after these edits, it'll probably be close to the final draft of this thesis. And I'm pretty sure I have basically all the shots I want now that we got the Raya stuff. Like I said, I'm a little disappointed I couldn't get the back of Raya's cloak to compare. I think I might use Zalowski's models then in that case, because it was so dark, it was so awkward. I'm not even sure I could get a good shot in that lighting anyway, so it's probably for the best. But yeah, I'll edit some of that stuff together with Raya. Include that stuff there, and then that combined, we have the shots of the bridge as well with the lava and stuff. It took forever, but I did get all those shots. It was like 30 shots or whatever, so combining all that together with what we just got here, and I think we'll be pretty much done. It's just a matter of me adding the thesis to the website, make sure it's all in order with all the images, and then adding quotes and stuff, and, you know, just get everything ready and prepared for posting. I might have that ready for by Monday. Then we might be able to do a the post on the new week. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, again, thanks everyone for kind of sticking with me and listening to this with me. Again, I always appreciate having people there to keep me company as we do this boring stuff, trying to get all these screenshots and reviewing all this lore and everything. Again, appreciate you. Until next time, pals. Later.